The worst crimes these people admit to, and how they escaped. When I was 12, I walked into a large, shall we say, Target-like store with my brother, grabbed the nicest bike we could find and walked it up to customer service and asked to return the bike my brother got for his birthday. They asked if we had a receipt, to which we replied no. They apologized and said we needed to go home and get the receipt before we could return it. We asked if we were going to be able to leave the store with the bike if we didn't have the receipt, and in response they called security over to escort us safely out, with the bike. It was too easy. When I was 18, I'm 32 now, I got arrested for shoplifting at a hardware store. I was at a dark point in my life, broke, I needed money, so I was taking things to return later for cash. They let you do that at the time without a receipt. I got caught stuffing items behind my belt by an off-duty cop who was in the aisle next to me looking through the cracks. As I walked out of the store, security nabbed me and more cops came. Cops had me standing with my hands on the table by the main entrance while they talked to the manager. They'd already discovered about $40 worth of items I'd taken, but when they were asking me to unload the items, I unloaded all but one. A $200 thermostat or something. As I was standing there at the table with the whole store watching me from behind, I very discreetly reached over and pulled it out of my belt, stuck it between my thighs, and wiggled it slowly down my legs all the way to my feet, and just kicked it off to the side. Somehow nobody saw it. That little feat was the difference between a Class C misdemeanor, theft under $50, and a Class B, which is a difference of about $2,000 in fines and up to 6 months of jail time. Not to mention lawyer fees. Spent a few hours in city jail, got bailed out by my girlfriend, and it never went on my record. This one's a little bigger than the stole a pack of gum posts. Am I proud I got away with it? A little, yeah. Would I have been screwed if I'd been caught? Yeah. I was enrolled at a university and I worked for them as well. A benefit of employment was they paid my tuition. Everything was great for about a year and a half, and then boom. The area I worked in at the university was bought by an outside organization. Luckily for me, the school agreed to grandfather me in and continue to offer me free tuition. However, the paperwork had to be done differently. Instead of just applying tuition costs to the accounting books for an employee, they now had to have the school invoice or bill the tuition to me. I'd submit the invoice to administration and they'd cut me a check, and then I used the check to pay the bill. Well, this one time before a spring semester, I decided that I wanted to pursue something that wouldn't allow me to continue my education for some time, so I took it off. At the same time, I was living by myself and finances were really tight. I got into some major credit card debt, you see. So I concocted a plan to forge an old fall invoice from my school. The school's invoice was very basic because they created it specifically for the employee and students in my department. A simple Word doc. I simply changed the dates and submitted it. A few weeks later, I've got a check from the school for $3,000. Instead of using it to pay the university for classes that I never took, I used it to live on for the next few months. Holy crap, that is for sure something you could have been completely screwed if they caught you out in. Like the shoplifter before you also mentioned, paying the money back plus the fines and whatever lawyer's fees you might have needed would not have helped your situation at all, I imagine. Me and 3 buddies were pulling a senior prank in high school. We snuck out of the parking lot and were removing all of the license plates from the underclassmen and administrators' cars. Our plan was to take everybody's license plate off except for the seniors and throw all of the rest in a pile in front of the lot. We were doing pretty well when one of the basketball coaches happened to walk out and see heads bobbing between cars. I heard him scream and I dove under a truck. All 3 of my buddies got caught and had to spend 2 weeks in alternative school while I got away scot-free. That was the beginning and end of my criminal career. If you truly were a mastermind, you would have waited until everything quieted down and your friends had been caught, then continued the prank. They'd never have known, and your friends could have even had the chance to say they had nothing to do with it, depending on the circumstances. I once broke someone's jaw in a drunken fight. The sound that it made still haunts me to this day. I fled the scene, and I've never faced any legal consequences. However, I did see a grainy CCTV photo of myself in the paper the next week. I'm in no way proud of what I did or the fact that I got away with it, but you can't change the past. I had a high school teacher who boasted about always catching students when they tried to toilet paper or vandalize his house. I succeeded in coating his entire front lawn with driveway sealer. That just seems like a recipe to get pranked in a massive way like that. Oh crap, I forgot. Once I put bologna all over the car of a woman my dad was having an affair with, which my mum and sister asked me to do. Later that week, my mum and dad went over to her house to confront the lady that this affair had to be over and that he needed to choose who he wanted to be with. Somehow my dad got drunk over there and left them both at her house, so my dad's mistress had to drive my mum home in the polka dot baloney station wagon. I was about 7 years old and I had my first pocket knife. I got this knife from my grandpa. This, however, has nothing to do with my story. Me and my best friend Karen at the time were outside playing in the early winter in northern Germany. It gets dark at around 5 or 6 p.m. and we were still outside, since we had holidays. Anyway, we were so bored and we decided to do something. I'm the mastermind of our criminal duo and wanted to do some of the bad things. Karen was just the really cute girl and my best friend at the time. So we went around the block to the pub where all the bicycles stood outside while the owners of the bicycles were inside the pub drinking. I took out my pocket knife and put it into the first tire of the bicycle. What a wonderful sound. I stabbed every bike in the bike parking lot and took Karen with me, and we ran as fast as we could. To this day, I think it's in the top 3 of the unsolved mysteries in Germany, the tire slash problem from 1996. I'm sure this is some sort of crime. Apologies in advance for this being long. We have a big outdoor music festival here that's in a large park downtown. They also shut down the streets around it as well as use the civic center right by the park. When I was 17, we went, like me and my then girlfriend, did every year. Well, it was the last day of the event and it was coming to an end on Sunday night. As we were sitting in front of the stage for one of the last acts, I got the ever so dreadful churning and gargling in my stomach that I always know is going to end in diarrhea. The porta potties are about a football field away and they always had long lines, so I decided to tough it out since I was about to head home. It progressed further to the point that I was starting to sweat and I was getting sharp pains as we began packing up and walking out. I have to walk about 4 blocks over to a parking garage where I and they, meaning her family, were parked. So we got there. I'm clinching, trying to hold it together, and she's doing the usual drawn-out teenage goodbye, which feels like eternity. Finally, she leaves, and I head up to the middle deck to my car, about 3 floors up, as they were on the bottom. As I walk toward my car, she calls my phone and informs me that she has my keys still. They were in her purse, and to come back down and get them. Now, at this point, it has rapidly progressed to the point where I'm penguin walking around this garage parking, about to lose the good fight. I go back down and get my keys, she draws out the I love yous again, I'll miss you, blah blah blah, and I'm about to just run away. She finally leaves and I think maybe I can get back in and just hold it till I get to the porta potty. Nope, no dice. Since the event was over, they wouldn't let anyone back in. I make it all the way back to the garage, dripping buckets of sweat, having to stop every 10 feet or so to clinch and wait for the temporary all clear. There are no public elevators in this garage, so I'm between floors in the stairwell, and then it's game time. Nothing could hold it back. It was as if someone had kicked me in my swollen, diuretic stomach. I flung my pants and boxers off and the most horrible, chunky liquid spews forth. There was so much of it that it started running down the stairs, and all of a sudden I hear of the door on the bottom floor, 2 flights of stairs below me. I quickly wipe my bottom with my boxers and throw my pants back on, and as I'm entering my floor's door, I hear, "Oh my freaking god, oh my god, oh my god, what the frick?" I hop in my car and I take off. Flash forward to the next day, we're sitting around watching TV and they run a news story about the event. Apparently the door I lost it at was also the floor that has the entrance to the mayor's office. They're looking for the vandals and there may be a reward for any information. At this point, being 17, I'm freaking out and thinking, what if the cameras saw me? What if they saw my car and start questioning people? What if they DNA test the brown matter? My girlfriend is utterly disgusted at the story and thinks people like that should have to be put down. A few days later, I get a call from the police department that I need to come down to the station. I'm, of course, freaking out. I immediately turn pale white according to my mum. We make it down to the station, and I'm at the point of being in tears thinking I'm going to jail. Turns out they'd recovered my stolen car stereo that was taken a few months back. They just needed me to sign off on it. Why have the cops got to call everyone like this in such an ominous manner? It seems like they could have said what this was about. Or maybe that's a way they have of getting everyone in, innocent or suspect, by refusing to discuss the purpose of the visit, good or bad. Keeps us all on our toes, I guess. Over the last 3 years, I've made about £30,000 blackmailing preverts who approach people of inappropriate age in online chat rooms. F's given, 0. I stole almost 80 lawn gnomes in 1 week. I steal towels every time I go to Lifetime Fitness. Probably 2 towels every time. So far, I've got about 52 towels. I have no need for any of them, I just like having extra towels. Also, in high school, I'd take $5 from the school store register when I worked there. I used to work in a Target where I'd take and eat pies all along. I'm a klepto and I have a problem. My husband uses his pocket knife to cut big stalks off the broccoli in the store, so he only pays for the bit we eat. And I let him, so I guess I'm an accessory. I once stole $16 in change over the course of 2 weeks to pay for a RuneScape membership. Busted. Bake 'em away, toys. Yeah. I once stole $30 worth of candy at an amusement park. It was the best Snickers bar I've ever had. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Stealing over $2,000 in books, including a moral philosophy book. I should clarify, I'm actually very opposed to theft despite my corrupt past. When you steal, you think you're stealing from the big mean corporations, but you're really not. You see, they have ways of protecting their costs by socializing their losses, like blaming it on the lowest worker on the ladder, and the person who's in charge of inventory will get their butt handed to them. A friend of mine was a cashier at her campus bookstore, and was friends with the inventory person and some people who stole books. When that time of semester nears, the inventory person routinely gets nervous because they have to be the mean guy stopping theft. When you're struggling for money and dealing with classes, you don't want to bear that burden as well. After one particularly big steal, my friend's friend broke down and cried because she thought she was going to be fired. She didn't, but it often comes out of her pocket when she can't do her job. After that, my friend tried to tell her stealing friends that what they did wasn't cool, but they were angsty college freshmen and couldn't have it, so she distanced herself from these buttholes. Please, think about what you do before you stick it to the man. Oh, and that moral philosophy book was Theory of Justice by John Rawls. It's a good read, I recommend it. When I was a kid, I had a fascination with fire and explosives, and I built a lot of little firecracker things. Rocket engines, stole black powder from my dad and whatnot. When I was 19, I had a really bright idea. I got a CO2 cartridge, emptied it, filled it with gunpowder, put in a long fuse, and then put that inside a 20-ounce Mountain Dew bottle full of gasoline. I put a cigarette on the end of the fuse to act as a delay. A friend and I cruised around downtown looking for somewhere to put this thing. We came across a really old van at the end of a quiet street with no houses nearby for quite a ways. It was a really run-down, abandoned area, and I knew nobody would be near. So I put this thing on the front passenger seat, lit the cigarette, and we got in the car and took off again. We drove down the freeway for a while, turned around, and came back to find the entire highway covered in thick, black smoke. We got close to the area, and I peered over the edge of the bridge. It seemed like my design had worked. The inner charge first turned the gas into a mist, and then ignited it, pushing everything out, turning the whole van into one big engine cylinder. The hood was laying 15 feet away, the windows were all blown out, and the van was on fire from bumper to bumper. We got out of there, drove up to the bluffs where we could see it. We watched a whole lot of firefighters work on this van for the better part of an hour. It was quite an adrenaline rush. I made the mistake of telling a couple of friends about it, people I definitely shouldn't have trusted. Not long after that, they and I got into a disagreement about something, and the next thing I know, I'm on the phone with the police. They want me and my girlfriend to come down to the station to talk. So we go to the police station. They'd received a tip that I was the one who set the fire. They questioned my girlfriend and I for 4 hours. Eventually, they mentioned a detective who was a longtime friend of the family who told them I'd always had an interest in bomb making and such. I confessed. The cops came to my apartment and turned the place upside down. They ended up finding a couple of bottle rockets, a few shotty shells, and a book on military history. I'd been tipped off a day prior that was coming, so I took everything in my place remotely bomb-related and put it in a trash can and dumped it in a porta potty 2 counties away. They brought me back to the police station for more questions. They asked me why I'd chosen this particular van. I said it was because it was clearly abandoned and nobody was around for a long ways. They said, "So you didn't intend to hurt anyone with this thing?" I said, "No, of course not. I just wanted to see what it would do." They told me they weren't able to locate the owner of the van and that it had previously been appraised at $50. They told me to go home, stay put, and expect a phone call. That was 14 years ago. I'm still waiting for the phone call. In short, I blew up a van with a homemade bomb. Saved by the bureaucratic incompetence. Congratulations, and if I did any of these, it would probably have been this one growing up. God, some of us are dumb little pyromaniacs as kids. When I was 14, some kids pulled a knife on me and took my bike. The bike was worth just under $1,000. At the time I was with two friends, all of us on bikes. Another guy tried to take both of the other bikes and also had a knife. So it's 3v2. 3 unarmed 14-year-old kids and 2 guys who I assumed were around 20, both with knives. I let the guys take my bike because screw it, I'm a little kid and I don't want to get shanked. I was scared and so I pretty much bailed. One of my other friends did the same, but the last of us tried to fight. The fighter got slashed in the face and hand. He's now blind in one eye but has all of his fingers and his hand works fine, just a scar. Before you ask, it was my brother's bike. I was only going close to home so he let me ride it. There's no way I could have such a bike at 14. So this happened, yeah. The 3 of us were left trying to figure out what the frick to do whilst my friend's face was frickin' hanging off. I mean, we were all 14, so pretty much crapping our pants already, but I almost passed out at his face and I was sick in the gutter. I can honestly say we thought he was going to die. I've never been in such a messed up situation in my life. So my friends stay while I go to look for help. I knock at the first house, it's dark, and some old guy told me to go away. I guess he thought I was just a dumb kid babbling and crying, so whatever. He was a selfish jerk and he didn't help. I went to the next door neighbor and one of the automatic lights came on outside the door. So that's the first time I see that I'm frickin' covered in blood on my hands and arms, from where I wiped my tears and mouth from throw up. So this woman just stares at me in shock and calls her husband. All of her kids come out and start crying too. I couldn't even imagine such a cluster F. But eventually, the dad got me talking clear enough for him to understand, and the cops got called. We all run back to the road where it happened, and a guy with his dog had already stopped to see what the frick happened. He didn't have a salvo, so it was glad the family had the police on the way. 1 frickin' police car arrived, despite me telling them that a 14-year-old was frickin' dying. A few moments later, a paramedic's car and an ambulance. Once the police established that this was very frickin' real, everything got real busy fast. They had the helicopter up looking for the guys, and a bunch more ambulances came to check us for injuries. The street was all closed off for forensic stuff, and I couldn't count all of the blue lights from police and medics. So yeah, my friend survived and we stayed friends. Got new bikes and moved on. I never forgot about it and it messed me up pretty bad for a while being paranoid at all times, and scared to go out with anything even slightly expensive like a phone or watch. Then, 2 years later, I'm on a train going to an interview for college and my brother's bike is right there in the bike compartment. He had a bunch of different custom parts, so the bike was pretty unique, and I knew for a fact it was the one, but I didn't know what the frick to do. I just sat looking at it, but I didn't have a cell on me to call anybody. The guy came and took the bike off the train and got off at the next stop. I thought I'd do something, so I got off the train after him and tried to follow. I didn't really think about it though, because hey, bikes are faster than feet. So he rode off, but I knew which way he went out of the station. So for that night, I'm thinking how frickin' dumb I was to let it go. That could be the guy who cut up my friend and now he's gone. Frickin' idiot, I just wanted to beat myself up. But I decided to check every day for him. I took the same train every time for 4 or 5 days and waited around the station for about half an hour with a cell phone this time. Eventually, I saw it and followed on my bike. So now, I know where he lives and where he travels properly, but still no idea if this is the exact guy. Perhaps he just bought it on eBay or something. I told my brother and he told the police. The police said they couldn't positively ID it because we had no photos or receipts for the bike parts, and we didn't record the serial number or stamp on the bottom. So I'm angry as F that we can't have it back, and we can't find who was responsible because, hey, it was 2 years ago and the police have bigger things to do now. So I followed the guy over and over just thinking what to do. Then one time he goes home and I'd usually go to a shop nearby and then take the train back. As I'm walking back with a soda, he comes from the house with 4 other guys, and one of them is the other guy who helped him rob us of our bikes. I don't know who the 2 extra guys were, but just other friends, I guess. But for sure I know it's the guy who took my bike, and more importantly, the guy who took my friend's eye. So I tell the police again, and again I know it's them, and I ask my friend if he can ID him, and he says yes. But the police don't care now. It's too old and they can't trust a 16-year-old kid to positively ID someone from 2 years ago, even with the bikes. Frickin' bullcrap. I'm so angry at the police for not helping more. So me and my friends take my dad's truck this time. I'm 17 by now, and we stopped until I could see him again come from the house. It took a few days, but then my friend says, yep, that's him. And I frickin' knew 100% anyway. So now we both have an ID on this guy. So we followed him around. We found his car and his house, and one day did a hit and run on his car when he stopped. We just nudged the side of his car, so he chased us to pay for the damage. We stopped on a quiet road eventually and pretended to be sorry and, oh, I didn't see you. And then we just frickin' beat the crap out of him. My friend wanted to end him, being totally serious about it, but that was too much for me. I stopped him when the guy was beaten badly enough, and well, we didn't feel any better, I can tell you. We just left him there on the road and went home. I was scared for a while that maybe he had died and we'd be in jail forever, but then we found the report in the news that he was in a coma. He eventually woke up and he's in a wheelchair forever. I think he has brain damage forever, but I don't know. In short, a guy took my friend's bike and slashed him in the face and he's blind in one eye. 2 years later, we found the guy and beat him into a coma, and now he's disabled. Mine's still in the planning phase. I'll let you know how it goes.
What is your bullet frickin' dodge story? I had trouble breathing and had been wheezing for a few months. Figured it was just bronchitis that I get all the time, and got some antibiotics. Figured what the hell, I guess I should ask a doctor. You know, the people trained in figuring this stuff out. Found a tumor the size of a pineapple wrapped around my heart and lungs. Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Definitely should have gone earlier, but so glad I actually decided to go. Edit. I'm alive, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Haha. For those commenting about the size of the tumor, it was a little over 5 by 3 inches and went from my trachea to my diaphragm. Double edit. 2.5 years cancer-free. Actually, as of yesterday. Didn't realize until today. Haha. Weird coincidence. At the time, it was not very good. I got to watch my pericardial drain surgery that night because they were afraid the anesthesia would make my trachea collapse. So I got to watch a surgery on myself, awake. Had to be at a 45-degree angle or the weight of the tumor pressed on my lungs, and under nothing except local anest for the catheter site. I like to think it's something not many people can say they've done. Advancing the catheter felt like slowly having the wind knocked out of you, but without the impact. I could actually feel almost exactly where it was as it went. Probably one of the most unique feelings I've ever felt. I could also feel the pop when they pierced my pericardium, and I could feel a very slight pressure relief as they drained the fluid initially. First of all, I could not imagine being awake for my own surgery, but I guess a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. And second, I don't know either, but where it's like, pop, I always just think about the bit from Superman versus the Elites. You can almost hear the pop. Lived outside St. Louis in my early childhood, woke up screaming in the worst pain of my life, and then I felt my face get sprinkled with something. I actually got shot in the hip, and when I sat up, a bullet went through my window right where my head was just at, and what sprinkled me in the face was tiny pieces of glass. So I dodged a literal bullet by taking a bullet. Edit. Really expected this to get lost in the sauce, but here are some details someone else asked about. So my bed was right next to my bedroom window, parallel to the wall. The end of the bed where my head was at was right next to the window. The bullet entered the wall and struck me in my left hip, so I guess I was sleeping on my stomach. The windows were real weird now that I think about it. It was actually 2 single-pane pieces of glass separated by 6 inches, and since both of them had a hole in them, you could stick a rod in and see that the bullet traveled right where my head had just been on my pillow. Edit. Another side story connected to this now that I think about those windows. One time I came home from school, I noticed the inner window shattered and there was blood all over the place. Turned out it was my dog that tried to launch herself through the window. We were pretty certain that someone was at my window scoping it out. She was super defensive of all of us. I'm pretty sure this actually occurred after the shooting. Yeah, I'll admit, living in England my whole life, I don't think I could ever feel really, truly comfortable unless I am within a brick house. Not me, but I had a hand in it. Knew this guy in high school peripherally. He was in the cool crowd of rocker-type guys, and I was a nerd. New girl arrived at our school from another town. She and I became friends, and a few months later, she started dating him. At first, she seemed cool, and we would talk about everything. At one point, however, she started talking about how she's been hooking up with her ex-boyfriend behind cool guy's back. Just before the end of the school year, she tells me she's pregnant and that she knows it belongs to her ex-boyfriend. She's laughing and really proud of herself because cool guy is going to do the right thing. Withdraw his college application, go work at the local gas station to support her and the baby. Her ex, the father of the baby, is kind of a loser, so she thinks it's the best thing even that she can screw him while making cool guy support her. I didn't really know this guy that well, but I got his phone number from an acquaintance of mine who knew it. Cool guy knew I was friends with this girl, but was still pretty surprised to hear from me. I told him all about her ploy and said, "Get a paternity test. It isn't yours." This guy was incredibly stoic, but after a sizable pause, he just broke down crying for a few minutes. He then thanked me, they broke up, and cool guy went to college and made something of himself. Just a good old story about bros looking out for bros. Damn girl, how could you even try and do that to cool guy? He's cool guy.
When I was 7, I got lost in Spain without my family. I had been lost for about 5 hours, really late at night, and had been going down some dark alleyways and car parks. I started asking random strangers if they spoke English, but they were only middle-aged men walking around alone. One guy didn't speak English, but he gave me a cuddle and took me back to his house around the corner. At this point, I'm crying my eyes out and just appreciated the help and kindness. When I got to his house, it turned out that he had a family, and the son was learning English in school. He got out his school workbook and asked me my name, and then they took me to the police station. My parents picked me up about 10 minutes later as they were driving around in a police car. That man could have been anyone, and I could have been kidnapped and never seen again. Not your ordinary bullet dodge.
Honestly, that is such a tough call. You're 7 years old in a foreign country and you are dead lost. Oh, God. I mean, I guess, yeah, eventually you'd have to just go, sod it, I'm going to rely on the kindness of strangers, but straight up, I thought that story was going to get a lot worse before it got better. I had my police car pulled over off the side of this rural road with the emergency lights on. I had stopped because there was a man splayed out in the middle of the asphalt. Turns out he was super drunk and decided to take a nap during his walk home. I had just helped him to his feet and placed him in the back of the car to drive him home when I hear an engine revving hard. I closed the car door and straightened up, just in time to have my car smashed out from in front of me by a pickup truck. I felt the truck's side mirror clip my body armor. The driver was drunk and had decided to go looking for his drunk friend. That friend was the guy I just picked up. The guy in the back seat survived the impact because those old Crown Victorias had massive trunks. The driver went to the hospital, and in the coming months he pled guilty for impaired driving. I remember the collision analysis showed the guy hit my car at 145 kilometers an hour. It was a wild night, and I still have major hang-ups when I have to stop my police car on roadways. I have a good amount of respect for police. I don't think every cop is on the up and up, but if you've ever seen any of those like body cam footage things where stuff just hits the fan, my God, police, especially police in America, go through some wild stuff. New teachers started at my high school at the start of the year, integrated fine. Students were assigned a pair of teachers to pay special attention to their academic needs. He was one of mine. Because of this, he knew I had a tense relationship with my parents. Because of the occasional sensitive material we covered in his English class, which I also took, he knew I had a telling sensitivity to sexual violence. As a teacher, he knew I was a troubled kid with a shaky support network. He gave me off-base but evidently well-intentioned advice about managing my controlling parents, worked with me and my other overseeing teacher to try and make school less nightmarish for me, and overall seemed like a warm, engaging guy. He gave some people the willies, but I felt fine around him. Then, middle of the week, a few months into the year, he doesn't show up. We're told he's not employed here anymore. No official details. As you maybe guessed, turned out he had an alleged history of sexually abusing students at past jobs. I don't know how it had been handled that they were able to find this out without him having tripped any of the flags I assume exist in the screening for potential teachers, but I guess better late than never. I don't think the school ever got, prosecuted for screwing up or whatever, so I guess it was an understandable miss. But yeah, that would have been pretty freaking awful. I got lucky. Me and any other kids, he might have been charming. For the sake of keeping it fresh on the first take, I was going in with a wizard voice, and I kind of went, I don't think I want to use the wizard voice on this anymore. It got a little dark.
Dated this guy briefly in college. He got into a horse riding accident early on in the relationship. Horse fell on him, broke his ankle, pelvis, and hip. Apparently had a prior addiction to pain pills I was completely oblivious to. He quickly relapsed and turned into a crazy pill-popping psycho. Tried sticking out and helping him. I did my best and I couldn't handle it. When I told him I was done with the relationship, he proceeded to call me the worst names in the world, begged me to forgive him, and then tried asking me to come hang out after he had called me the biggest harlot in town. WTF. He then started doing harder stuff and has been involved in a hit-and-run accident. The guy he hit died. X moved the body, fled the scene, dumped his truck in a car park that had surveillance cameras in it. He did get caught for it. Talk about a bullet dodged. I've had some pretty crappy relationships, apparently.
I think this is quite exemplary of the downward spiral that drugs can take you in. I mean, this dude was apparently riding horses one day, and then he's doing hit and runs and dumping bodies and stuff. Seriously, kids, stay away from hardcore drugs. God. I met him on one of those sites that isn't just a dating site, but is a dating site to find someone who shares your particular interests, and we seemed compatible enough to meet.
I much prefer talking face-to-face, so once I see someone might be interesting, I generally set up a face-to-face date right away. We decided to meet halfway and we'd figure out where to eat once we were there. So we met in the parking lot and I got in his car and he drove us around until we found a restaurant we both liked. We sat down and immediately he started chatting. He was fairly charming about it, but it got really creepy really quick because he seemed to move the conversation onto every person I interacted with. And once he established how close I was to them, how often I saw them, texted them, talked to them, it's like he would look satisfied for a moment and then move on to the next. It's hard to really explain, but I would tell a story about me and a friend and he would ignore every part of the story and just go straight to questioning me about my friend. The only thing he seemed interested about them was how often I interacted with them. Like, for example, stuff like this. Him. Are you guys close? Me. Fairly. Him. How often do you hang out? Me. A few times a week. He nods and brings the conversation to coworkers, asking me what my boss was like. Was I always on time? And he just did that over and over. I mentioned my parents and he wants to know if I'm a good girl who goes to see them every weekend, if I talk to my mom or dad on the phone every night. I mean, he would bring it in with stories and from a teasing tone, but he did it over and over with every person I mentioned interacting with. It got creepy and I was freaking out in the back of my head and it was getting really hard not to get up and just leave. Awkwardness scares me more than getting kidnapped though, and having to call someone to give me a ride because I thought the guy was interviewing me to be his next victim just sounded nuts in an already intense situation for me. I just started lying my butt off, so I mentioned brothers. He of course asked how many. I said 5 and started going into vivid detail about how overprotective they are, how they check in on me constantly, how one is a cop, the other is a private investigator, etc. I also mentioned how my friends make me do a safety call. Either I was paranoid or it worked because he did take me back to my car and I got to drive away and never contact that guy again. I figure if the guy was casing my life out, those would be red flags for him.
I'm not gonna lie, I would probably have the exact same thought process as this person. It takes even less than that for me to stop and consider whether or not my date or someone in my general vicinity is plotting my downfall at any time.
Back in my raving days in the early 2000s, before it got trendy, I got deep into e-use and subsequently became a small-time dealer. Small-time over the course of a few months rapidly became pretty big. One night after re-upping, buying more Scooby snacks to sell, I went over to my buddy's house to play Counter-Strike until the early hours of the morning. On my way home, I got pulled over. I had 2,500 green triangle Scooby snacks in my trunk. I pulled out my license and registration, laid it out on my lap before the cop came to my window and proceeded to be as polite as possible. The cop asked me why my eyes were red and asked if I smoked the ganja. I said absolutely not. I never liked the ganja. Weird, I know. And I told him we were playing Counter-Strike for an 8-hour plus session, and that's probably why. He ran my license, which was clean, came back to my car and said, "Okay, drive safely and let me go." I left that scene bricking it. Had he looked in my trunk, I would have been arrested and looking at a distribution felony and at least 12 to 25 years. Not to mention it would have destroyed my life. I stopped dealing and raving after that. Today, I have a lovely wife, my own home, good health, thriving business, healthy toddler, and another one on the way. Talk about bullet dodged. My life and the life of those I love would have been drastically different if it played out the other way. It should have. I am the lucky one. I lose sleep often thinking about that. Edit. Wow, thanks for all the encouraging words and upvotes. For those of you who are critical of my choice to slang E, you need to realize that my customers were all adults with free will. Some prominent doctors, lawyers, teachers, etc. The choices we all make in life, and the consequences of those choices fall on us, period. I didn't make the drugs or import them. I didn't force anyone. I've actually cut people off many times. And today's society is frankly too quick to blame everyone else but the person, ourselves. Stop that. For those saying I got a lucky pass and need to pay it forward, I totally agree. My life changed from that day on.
Now, I don't have that much respect for drug dealers by any means, but I am happy that this person is keeping their nose clean now and living a decent life. I really agree with the sentiment about personal responsibility. That is an issue that I think a lot of people really don't understand anymore. You just got to think about your actions, how it will impact you, how it might follow you in the future before you do something. Go watch the Back to the Future trilogy. That's basically the core of that entire thing. How your actions, how your decisions can have a terrible outcome in the future.
Well, just recently I had a job offer, which never felt right in my gut. After the initial excitement of actually getting an offer wore off, I was feeling kind of meh towards the position, but figured I could do it for a year or two since it would potentially allow for a better quality of life. However, when reading the contract, so many warning bells went off in my head. My husband works in employment and labor law, so I had him review the contract. The first words out of his mouth last night were, "Don't sign that contract as it is." Some highlights include, keep in mind I work in K-12 education, not some extremely secretive cutthroat industry, a 1-year no-compete clause for any tangentially related position in the entire county, which, keep in mind, has the largest school district. 60 days written notice if I were to leave, not crazy at first, but good luck getting a new job over the summer, which is when most schools post positions. If I decided not to return after signing a contract, I'd have to reimburse all insurance benefits starting from July 1st, 2017. Not sure if these are standard in other industries, but I've never seen anything like this as a teacher. Basically, it would make it close to impossible to leave the job, and I could potentially be screwed so many ways if I did. If this was what was in the contract, what could the work environment be like? Just sent off my thanks but no thanks email to the director with the school year quickly approaching. Looks like I'll be back at my current employer.
Read your contracts, kids. I know I don't. No, I pay other people to read them for me. The city was doing road construction in front of our place about 3 years ago. It was annoying, noisy, and covered everything with fine dust. During this time frame, my son ended up catching some sort of bug, or so we thought, that seemed a lot worse at night. 3 nights in a row, he ended up jumping out of bed after throwing up all over the place and having diarrhea. It was awful. We would spend hours just rubbing his back and cleaning him up. I would then put him to bed in the spare bedroom and he would pass out completely exhausted. After the 3rd night, I went on a cleaning spree and was basically scouring the hell out of everything to get the sick air out of the house, when I discovered that damn dust from the road construction was coating everything with this grimy blackish residue that was incredibly hard to remove, or what I thought was road dust. I was irate enough that I took a pic and posted it on Facebook and was whinging about the construction and asking if anyone else was having the same issue. A couple hours later, I get a message from a friend that asked if we had an oil furnace. I thought it was odd, but just said that yes, we do, and asked why she asked. She then proceeded to tell me that all her ceiling fans and vents, etc. looked exactly like my pic did when her furnace filter got clogged and wasn't burning off the oil properly, which in turn filled her house with carbon monoxide. I totally went into preservation mode and packed everyone into the truck and drove around the corner to the fire station. Firemen came in their trucks with their carbon monoxide detectors, and sure as hell the basement was highly toxic and was filling the house. My son's room is directly above the furnace room, and when the heat was kicking in at night, he was getting poisoned. We are all lucky to be alive, especially my boy. Our landlord installed carbon monoxide detectors 2 days later after the house aired out and the furnace guy did his repairs. Scary stuff, kids. So I actually do laboring. I've never done road work before, but God, I can only imagine how bad the road dust is for you. But I did a lot of soft strip demolition work, really. And when I was working like 10-hour shifts a day, I would do like 50-hour weeks or something like that, just moving stuff around for these guys. Loads of people would not wear their mask when it's like we've just been breaking down walls and there's loads of construction dust everywhere. And obviously as a voice actor, I want to protect my voice and everything. But I would just know all these guys that would take like, I don't know, 12 smoke breaks a day or something, probably more, and still just be breathing in this dust because they didn't want to wear a mask. And I'm like, dude, you are ridiculous. Your lungs are going to be messed up in the future. Whew, I'm so glad that the story didn't end in tragedy, but you know, that's why it's a bullet dodge story. I told this to my dental hygienist recently and she thought it was funny, so here you go. My friend owned this camp in the mountains. When it wasn't in season, he brought a bunch of friends up to hang out. So it's very late at night and he goes to get some people at the front entrance and leaves me and another friend alone. We decide to do the zip line over this pond. As my friend is explaining to me, you're going to feel a yank after you jump off.
I just tell him, go and I'll see what you're talking about. He goes and looks awesome. Now keep in mind, it's pitch black outside, so I ready myself and jump. I feel the little hit she was talking about, but something isn't right. As I conclude that something indeed isn't right, it feels like I get hit with a pickup truck in the back. I was falling about 25 feet without even knowing and landed perfectly on my back in about 1.5 feet of water. The rope snapped. Any other rotation would have left me severely injured or dead. My friend thought I died, but I got up and met him around the corner. My back looked like I had been shot point blank with about 50 paintballs. Other than that, I was fine.
Well, that is some divine luck. Like, they didn't even realize they were falling. It was that dark. God damn, they are one lucky SOB. I was in Windhoek, Namibia doing the post-college wanderer thing. I was hitting the bars when I randomly bumped into an Australian guy I'd met a few weeks earlier in Harare, Zimbabwe. Harare is an epic crapburg, so there's nothing to do but get drunk and wait for your flight/bus out while you regret your decision to visit Harare. This Australian dude was my companion on the drinking, waiting, and regretting part, but we were going to different cities and parted ways when we left. So we randomly meet again in Windhoek and quickly decide that we need to get smashing drunk, just like 3-week-old times. Namibia is a great place to get drunk in mostly safe streets, the animus and energy of African nightlife, and relic German colonial predilection for extraordinary beer. As we're at the bar getting blasted out of our minds on 35 varieties of Namibian lagers, this gal comes up and starts flirting with me. She's smoking hot, great conversation for a couple hours, and she ends up asking if I want to come back to her place. I hadn't gotten laid in months and was 22 years old, feeling frisky as hell, but I said no. Something just didn't seem right. I tell my buddy that I'm going to call it a night and go back to my hostel. He asks if I minded if he made a go at the girl. I tell him sure, but something seems weird about her. I go back and pass out. I woke up with a screaming hangover the next day and spent the entire day in bed. I spent a couple more days in Windhoek, 10 out of 10 town by the way, highly recommend, but don't come across him again. I didn't expect to, so no big deal. I buy a ride west across the desert to Swakopmund and spend a few days hanging out there, and I run into my friend looking like a wreck. Turns out the chick took him back to her place, got him blackout drunk, took literally everything he owned except for the clothes he was wearing, and ditched him 3 miles outside the city in the desert. He tried to hitchhike his way back to the hostel but didn't know where he was and ended up on the back of a pickup truck going the wrong direction, depositing him in Swakopmund. Really glad I let my brain overrule my one-eyed monster in that situation. It doesn't happen often, but I'm glad when it does. Dodged a bullet. Now, I won't go into detail, but as a gentleman who has taken some pretty big risks in some cases, this Australian dude is just on another level. He's either more daring or more naive than I am, because I would never go with someone that I didn't really trust in a foreign country that I didn't speak the language in, to a location that I'm unaware of or anything like that. Hell, I'm surprised that they would just go wandering like that and then just get absolutely trashed, because, man, anyone could take advantage of you, really.
Parents of Reddit, how did your son or daughter's significant other win you over? There are enough threads about how you ended up hating your son's girlfriend or daughter's boyfriend, but what have they done to gain your support? When I was in 10th grade, a guy I liked came over. My dad heard him playing guitar, and apparently that's all it takes for my dad to fall in love. That was the only time we hung out. I'm 31. He still asks about that guy. I was supposed to be one of those good Asian daughters that didn't date until I finished college. I got rebellious in sophomore year and decided to keep dating the guy who took me to winter formal. Mom actually liked him. Dad refused to acknowledge him. One day, my dad mentioned he got a new car stereo and he was going to take it to Best Buy to have it installed. Boyfriend said, nope, let me handle it, and spent an entire Saturday afternoon installing the radio and cleaning up the wires in his dash. Dad loved him afterwards, basically treated him like his own son. Parents didn't even bat an eye afterwards when we started living in sin a couple of years later, but by that time he was an engineer, we were engaged, and I couldn't give a rat's behind. I had been casually seeing a guy for a couple of weeks when one night we were out to dinner and I was having a particularly homesick night. I live 15 hours from my family, and at this point I hadn't seen him in over 8 months. He joked and said that we should drive home and surprise my mom for Mother's Day that weekend. The next day, we were in the car driving. I've never seen my parents so surprised. Also a little worried. I think their initial thoughts were that something had gone terribly wrong and I was there to deliver the news. My parents have loved him ever since. Won my significant other's dad over by shaving him. We had a not too close relationship, always quite distant. After he suffered a stroke and was hospitalized, he couldn't move too well, and as he did not want to be washed and shaved by the nurses, and my significant other was not able to do this, it was my duty. Even though we couldn't really talk, I knew I got his approval. He said, "Take good care of her," and he died a few days later. On the bright side, this person has posted an update and says, "Yes, I'm still together with the girl. Real family with 2 kids now." Not quite what was asked, but I knew I was there with my significant other's folks when her dad stopped giving me room temperature beers from the pantry and started giving me cold beers from the fridge. Upon meeting my teenage daughter's significant other, she was always embarrassed by me at that time, so she says, "Dad, are you drunk?" It's the middle of the day, and of course I wasn't drunk. I hesitate for a moment and then just answer, "Yes." Her new significant other looks at me completely straight-faced and says, "Same." Sense of humor wins me over. I won my boyfriend's, now husband's, parents over by throwing a party. It was his birthday and I had gotten a good number of people to show up for a surprise party. He was on the phone with his parents when he walked in and everyone yelled, "Surprise!" He got all teary-eyed and told his parents, "I have to go. It's a surprise party. I didn't know I had so many friends." For good measure, I sent them photos of the party as well. His mom particularly liked the set of photos that showed my SO and friends battling a bomb-shaped grill that apparently caught on fire and exploded. Apparently, making my SO smile. It seems that it was pretty rare enough for her mother to actually be surprised to see her smile. And now my top comment is about my wife. I'm the significant other of the daughter in this story. My girlfriend's dad basically hated me until the time we drove together down to Monterey from Austin and had to make conversation for 7 hours and pretend it wasn't awkward. He's an engineer, so I went with that and casually mentioned my desire to get a small CNC lathe for metal fabrication, or possibly build a basic XY controller to attach to a traditional lathe. Turns out his final project for graduation at college was to build a CNC lathe. We nerded out and started discussing the pros and cons of stepper motors versus servos, then the conversation moved to Arduinos, and the rest is history. Now we get along handsomely, and it makes my girlfriend very uncomfortable. My good friend got dumped by his girlfriend halfway through college after she cheated on him. Her dad called and said, "My daughter is a frickin' moron. You know there's always so-and-so, her 1 year younger sister." Pecan pie. Yes, fixing computers helped. Yes, him being a nice guy helped. But I swear, my husband won over my entire family and extended family on his pie alone. Quote from every family meal ever before we got married. "Is your boyfriend coming? Is he bringing that pecan pie? Now that we are married, hey, where's his pecan pie? You know you married a winner there. He makes great pies." My significant other bonded with my dad immediately by their mutual hatred of my older sister's ex-boyfriend, baby daddy. Actually, my younger sister also had a trash can of a BF at the time. So when my significant other showed up with a car, a stable job, and actually treated me with respect, it was like a miracle. I'll tell you the story of how my husband won over my dad. My dad has a sailboat, which he's kind of crazy about. My husband has a background in naval architecture. We went to visit my dad, and while we were on his boat in the marina, the guy in the slip next to us runs over. "My boat is taking on water. Come help me bail it out." "Don't worry," responds my father. "My son-in-law is a naval architect." Something to note at this point in the story, my now husband and I had only been dating for like 8 months. We weren't even close to getting engaged, let alone married. But now all of a sudden, boyfriend is a son-in-law. So now husband just goes with it. Sure, I, the son-in-law, will see if I can help. He gets on the guy's boat and sees that there's water seeping through the floorboards. He thinks this is weird given that the pump is going and the boat isn't listing or anything. So he gets down, sticks his finger in the water, and licks it. It's fresh water, now husband says. Your bilge is leaking. Did you remember to turn the hose off after you finished filling up your freshwater tank? And that, my friends, is how my husband became a legend at Dad's Marina and my dad's favorite person of all time. Edit, because, despite being with my husband for almost 10 years now, I still know nothing about naval architecture. I know the exact moment I won my wife's family over. I could see it in her father's eyes. It was high school, before we started dating. The first time I went over to her house, actually. Her father and 2 brothers were all pretty tall, and I'm average height. It's a very alpha male household, and they had this thing they like to do to potential boyfriends. So when my wife left the room to go to the bathroom or whatever, all 3 of them stood, lined up shoulder to shoulder, and loomed over me, blank-faced, glaring down, no words, no motion, just staring and looming. I found out later that her last boyfriend almost cried when they did this to him. I've always been really socially awkward, but an odd part of that awkwardness is that I'm never intimidated by people. I don't know why, but they just don't frighten me. I slowly stood up, looking them all in the eye, and then poked her dad right in the tummy. I said, "Boop!" He stared for a second, and then a giant grin split his face. It turns out that he's a massive goofball. From that moment on, I was a member of the family. The whole dating and marriage thing was just a formality to them. My ex's father did something similar. I met the entire family except the father, who was working offshore. Then he came home one week and we were spending at her parents' place. We'd been there a while, had dinner, and I was talking to my ex's brother. Suddenly, everyone goes quiet and he's home now. All right, I thought, time to man the heck up. He enters, gives his wife and son some love, then his daughter, my ex, before he turns on to me. He stares me up and down and I say, "Hello, sir, nice to finally meet you," and extend my hand for a handshake. He takes it and grips it a bit harder than normal firm shakes. I squeeze just as much back, and that was that. Afterwards, my ex and her mother tells me how they've seen him do that to other guys my ex had brought home, and how they saw him deflate while looking me up and down. Mostly up, I'm 6'7", and that the handshake sealed the deal. I wasn't completely convinced, but later that year at Christmas, after dinner on Christmas Day, he came with beers and cognac, poured one for everyone and put the bottle on the table, saying something like, "Just pour yourself another when you want." Now, I'm more of a whiskey guy, but cognac is good too, and I was getting a bit of a buzz, so I took him up on it. As soon as he sees me reach for the bottle, he goes, "That's a good lad. How about you, son?" to his son. And the son/brother-in-law goes, "Nah, I'm good with the strong stuff for now," which launches the father into a joking tirade on how his son-in-law is a better drinker than his own son. That's when I knew. My ex later told me, we split on good terms, that her father had almost went ballistic when she told him we split up. I'm a martial arts instructor, among other things. I caught my daughter's boyfriend looking at my belt rack, 5th degree black belt, and trophies from when I was much younger. And he said, "Are all those yours?" "Yup." "So you know how to throw someone?" "Yup." "Could you teach me?" How much of a setup did I need? I took him into the backyard and threw his skinny butt around for about 45 minutes. And every time he hit the ground, he got back up with a huge smile and said, "That was awesome, show me how." So I took him to class with my daughter and had her practice throws on him. He never complained, never flinched, and never whined. After class, I told my daughter I liked him. So she broke up with him. So close. My wife won my parents over easily. Preface, had an old Rottweiler named Max that was young at heart but clearly showing his age. My previous girlfriends never petted him or gave him attention. He didn't crave it, but he wanted to be acknowledged. Fast forward a few years, and I bring my girlfriend, now wife, home for Christmas break. I introduced her to Max, and she immediately sat on the floor and rubbed him, petted him, and just gave him love that no other girlfriend gave him. I hadn't seen his little nub wag so quickly in a long time. He ended up falling asleep with his head in her lap. Max is no longer with us, but at least I got his approval before he passed. I will never forget that day. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. I am so happy to be reading this story because I love dogs. I love the thought of just petting on dogs and being their friend, and just having a dog's approval in the family is one of the most heartwarming experiences of all time. I have a huge smile on my face right now just reading that story. It was my parents, actually. When my mom first met my dad, he was working in an auto body repair shop, actually really good at what he does. Well, to surprise my mom's dad, he borrowed my grandfather's 1968 SS Camaro, which had been nearly totaled in a car wreck a few years back, and completely repaired it. When they first met, my dad shook my grandfather's hand, said, "Mr. Haynes, my name is Kevin. Why don't you come outside?" His Camaro was sitting outside looking almost brand new. My mom says that was the only time she has ever seen her dad cry. My fiancé went over my parents individually, but nothing beats my stepdad. My stepdad loves fun facts, and they're always fairly obscure, and I can never answer them, but that only makes it more fun for him. So the three of us, fiancé, stepdad, and I, are sitting around watching The Simpsons, and my stepdad goes, "Who's that band?" when Spanish Flea comes on. My fiancé immediately answers with, "Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass." My stepdad was dumbfounded, and I'm pretty sure that's when our relationship got a seal of approval. My wife's dad told me I'm the only boyfriend he ever liked. He said my strategy of whenever I would call to talk to her and he answered the phone, instead of just saying, "Is my wife there?" or "Can I talk to my wife?" I would always say, "Hi, Mr. her dad, how are you?" and make brief small talk before asking for her. It wasn't a strategy, it's just how I was raised and/or Southern politeness, but it worked. As a Southerner myself, that's common courtesy. I worked in an ice cream shop with my current significant other, and her mom came in one night. Without knowing it was her mom at the time, me being friendly, I struck up a conversation with her while I got her ice cream and food for her. 3 months later, I started dating the girl I worked with, and I immediately recognized her mom when I met her for the quote-unquote first time. The first thing her mom said was, "Well, you already have my approval." I won over my now wife's parents by being able to socialize with them even though we didn't share a common language. We ended up doing some sort of pseudo-charades in order to get things ready for her birthday celebrations. Then I ate some particularly spicy food, which was apparently made just for me. When I ate it and didn't keel over on fire, they thought I was brave enough for their daughter. When I expressed how delicious it was and picked up 3 more, they knew I was part of the family.
Apparently fixing all of her family's computer and other technology-related problems doesn't help.
In college, I was sleeping with my then-boyfriend in his bed, with his roommate also sleeping in the same room 4 feet away, and I wet the bed for the first time since I was out of diapers. I woke up early and after realizing what happened, tried to sneak out of bed. He woke up to find me humiliated, shaking, and then bursting into tears. He assured me everything was okay, he knew it was an accident, he was still very attracted to me, and let me shower first. When I told my mom how he handled it, she was sold. Now I have to convince her my current boyfriend is just as great. Not a parent, but I'll talk about how my white as Wonder Bread significant other found some common ground with my Middle Eastern parents. Eating meals together is a really important part of my culture. My current SO was willing to try anything and everything my mom put in front of him. My SO came from a household where his mother only ever cooked meat and potato types of meals, and they never ate out at restaurants, so he had a beginner's palate. Still, he tried everything from picked vegetables to rice with weird stuff in it, and even stews that looked like liquid poop. My mom is a sucker for anyone who will eat her food, so she started to like him a bit more after having him over for dinner. This story is about the little things. My now husband won over my mom forever when, after meeting for the first time at a college cocktail party, my parents were visiting for Parents' Weekend, he put his jacket over my shoulders when we all went outside. It was a brisk fall day and I was in a dress. She has always said she liked him from that moment on. 33 years later, she wasn't wrong. My boyfriend won my dad over by taking me to several different doctor's offices when I was having medical issues about a month after we started dating. He also stayed calm enough to speak with my parents on the phone and tell them what was going on while I was freaking myself out too much to talk. My dad has always said he likes him well enough with previous boyfriends, but has told me several times he likes my current boyfriend a lot and thinks he's a good guy. My grandmother has never liked any of my boyfriends. She has always told me flat out that she didn't really like them, which hurt me immensely but wasn't really out of character. Pretty much nothing I pursued or achieved was good enough for her. I resigned myself to the fact that she would never like anyone I brought home. She never really warmed up to my mother, even though my mom is an amazing human being. No one was good enough for my dad in her mind. Then one day, she surprised me. After meeting my SO for the first time, she told me, "Well, I didn't expect to like him, but I did. He looks at you when you speak, listens to what you say, and responds in a way that shows genuine interest." That was it. That's all a guy had to do in order to impress my grandmother. I'm slightly horrified that she didn't see those qualities in any of the other men I brought home. That happened 6 years ago, and my SO and I are married now, expecting our first child. According to my girlfriend, I won over her mother when I helped her grandfather get up and down after a surgery and offering to stop by and help him out for a few weeks. I just thought I was being polite. As a brother with a sister who has had a pretty awful selection of boyfriends, there has only been one who has impressed me. He didn't make some huge gesture or do me favors or try to win me over. He cared about her and stuck around. It took a while, but that's the only way he was ever going to get any trust or admiration. My now husband, David, and I met online and were in a long-distance relationship while I was in college near Duluth, Minnesota. We had never met in person before, and I invited him to come see me. I told my mom about the meeting, and she was really paranoid. Call me every day so I know you're alive type of thing. He came, and we really hit it off, and we were having a lot of fun. After day 2, Mom was convinced that he at least wasn't an axe murderer, and after a couple of more days, I decided that I was into him enough that he should meet my parents. I know, poor guy, but this was a good thing in the long run. So I invited them up on that Saturday. They picked us up and we all went out to lunch and made some polite conversation, and we decided we should take a small trip to Split Rock Lighthouse, a famous lighthouse on Lake Superior about an hour from Duluth. I remember that I left my camera in my dorm, so we swung by so I could pick it up. I left David in the car with my folks, alone for just a few minutes. While I was gone, my dad joked, "Quick, let's drive off," to which David, who has a very sarcastic dry wit, responded, "I knew that one way or another this trip would end with me dead in the woods." There was a shocked pause and then my parents started cracking up. When I returned, it was clear the ice had broken, and they relayed what had been said to me. My mom was like, "I think he'll fit right in." She often related the story, characterizing it as the moment she decided that David was right for me. Luckily, I agree. I am a white American man married to a Japanese woman. Here's the story of how I won over her dad, then got him to hate me, then won him back. While we were dating, I was living and working in Japan, and I won over her dad because I could tell puns in Japanese, his favorite style of humor, and because we shared common interest in films and music. We also just got along well in general. However, he was very old-fashioned, and so my then-girlfriend opted to not ever tell him that we were officially dating, even though it was obvious. My company ended up transferring me to Canada, so my girlfriend and I decided to get married in a hurry so she could go with me. When we announced this to her dad, his eyes instantly turned red as he realized his daughter was leaving the house and the country. Tearfully, he asked me what my plans were for my career, how I would take care of her, etc. Somehow, none of my answers seemed to please him, and the night ended with me feeling like I had screwed up pretty bad. He didn't speak to me for more than 3 weeks, and I knew he resented me for taking his daughter. Then my parents and 3 of my siblings came to Japan to be there when we signed the legal marriage documents, even though we were planning to have a real wedding 1 year later. Both families got together for a fancy, and my family saved my butt. They brought gifts for my future in-laws, told stories, jokes, and treated them like royalty. My future in-laws loved my family, and by the end of the week, I was newly married and my new wife's father treated me like a son of his own. We have gotten along famously ever since, and I credit that all to my amazing parents, brothers, and sisters. Funny end note, we had a real wedding 1 year later at my home in Chicago. My wife's father's speech ended up being the highlight of the night. It went something like this, paraphrasing. 150 years ago, Admiral Perry of the U.S. Navy came to Japan, pointed his ship's cannons at Tokyo, and demanded that Japan open itself to the West for trade. In much the same way, James came into our lives and pointed his cannons at my family. But just as the U.S. and Japan came to be close allies and friends, so too has James grown to be a close friend and member of our family. Everyone told me it was the best part of the wedding. My parents are pretty traditional and really like the idea of any potential boyfriends asking my dad's permission to date me. However, after 3 years of undergrad, living away from home, and inevitable casual boyfriends, they had kind of come to accept that this was not going to happen. I made this joke after a one-night stand made it clear he wanted to date me. We went on a few dates and things were progressing well. However, I was surprised one day to hear that my father and brother were coming to visit the city for a day. Turns out this guy had contacted my brother on Facebook and was taking him and my father out to lunch to ask permission to date me. This one-night stand is now my husband. My son's girlfriend won us over by helping us bring him back to dressing like a human being. Despite being an olive-skinned, thanks to my distant Italian relatives and my wife being Hispanic, middle-class boy from the suburbs, he dressed like a hardcore rapper. He looked ridiculous, as besides everything else, he was almost 6 feet tall, so sagging pants and shorts would have to be elephant-sized to work. I'm not sure why he went through that phase, as even during it he was fairly well-mannered. There's a lot of other reasons, not least of them being that she is the daughter of a childhood friend of my wife, and thus for the same ungodly remote town she's from, current population 150-ish. I cajoled and demanded, and he didn't change. She batted her eyelashes, and he did. She won him and us. This is a story from my significant other's parents. It was first year of university, and it's still summery outside. Every night for the first week here was drinking and partying on the quad and in the dorms. Well, at the time, I had met my significant other once in the hallway, and that was it. Well, one night, she goes out and gets blasted because her previous boyfriend was always partying despite her protests. Well, she nearly died of alcohol poisoning that night. She was rushed off to the hospital for detox and such. I had no idea this happened. I only saw the ambulance pull up to my dorm building. The next morning around 5 a.m., she was knocking on my door still inebriated from the night before. I didn't understand anything she was saying because she just kept saying she woke up in a room, locked to a bed with needles in her arm. In a thick Slovakian accent, too. She failed to mention that she was at the hospital. So I let her in my dorm, sat her on my bed, made her a cup of Earl Grey, and put Tarzan on my telly and had her watch it. Then I slowly tracked down her phone, wallet, and keys she had lost all over campus the night before. Then I bought her a giant 2-liter bottle of water and food. I brought her to her room and gave her the food and then some Advil. She told her parents all this, and they were very happy someone had helped her. Later that week, she started inviting me everywhere, and we eventually became best friends, and then even more than that. Well, Christmas break rolls around, and she left before me to go skiing with her family. I was texting her asking where she and her family were skiing. They were at a mountain not far away. I asked her how happy she would be if I came the next day. She was thrilled but thought I was blowing hot air. To her surprise, I was at her lodge the next day after a 12-hour bus ride. She couldn't believe it, and her parents were impressed that I went through all that trouble. I spent the next 3 days skiing and going into hot springs, and then I bussed back to the university to finish my last final. 3 years later, I am still with her, and her parents still highly approve of me for all the things I do for her. Not a parent, but how I won my in-laws over was pretty harrowing but funny. My wife and I knew each other for years, but having done the long-distance thing, I didn't meet her family until we eloped. I met the in-laws the day before the wedding. Due to the madness, though, I didn't get to know them until a short while later. Visiting them for the weekend, my wife's mom said that I could help myself to anything in the fridge. Me, my wife, and her brothers went out drinking, and when I came back, they urged me to take liberties with any leftovers, which I, of course, had no problem with. Stumbling upon a bag full of bacon, that was equivocal to manna from heaven. Unbeknownst to me, though, Mom-in-law had cooked it in preparation for one of her kids' graduation parties the next day. I had the misfortune of seeing her wake up, walk to the fridge, discover that I had eaten all of her bacon, and start bawling. She was so stressed about the party that this was the straw that broke the mother-in-law's back. It was my first real impression on her, and I done screwed up. The rest of the fam was really cool about it, and assured me she would get over it. I felt terrible about it, though. The next time I visited them, I didn't say anything about it. Still too fresh. But I wore a shirt I made that had big bold letters saying, "Sorry I ate your bacon." We've bonded over the trauma ever since. This story is an example of what good communication can do for a relationship. I don't know about when it happened for sure, but the moment I honestly felt accepted by my significant other's family was when we had just gotten back from our very first road trip together. We drove to Miami from Houston and stayed at SeaWorld Hotel next to Universal Studios. Anyways, I was having a beer and shooting pool with her dad and grandpa, when suddenly her dad looks at me and says, "You know, you're the first boyfriend to make it through a vacation with my daughter and still be in love with her when you get back." I wasn't surprised after the trip I just had, but he was right. I still loved her and that had only grown through the past vacation. He asked what the worst part was, and I told him it was when my girlfriend, his daughter, had wanted to do something and I told her no, because it wasn't a good idea. The look of utter shock on his face was unexpected, and then her grandpa chimed in, same look of shock. "You told her no?" Then her dad goes, "And lived?" Then they started laughing, and instead of asking me to get the beer, her dad handed me one. I felt respected a bit, and at the least accepted as a man within her family. Clarification on girlfriend's behavior, the reason for shock was that she had never had a boyfriend that stood up to her. They were glad I wasn't a pushover. That's all. Her mother also commented to her, she told me about it after the fact, that I had the patience of a saint. Her actions on the trip, first off, let me explain a bit. My significant other is a very high-strung individual who has had traumatic events take place in her past. No, I won't go into any more detail. She has a script now for high anxiety, legitimately attained after blood work and has regular meetings with her physician. So, imagine being with a still relatively new boyfriend. We'd only known each other for about 6 months, away from home, and on a very busy freeway that passes through small towns in backwoods Alabama and Florida. Very stressful for anyone. But throw in the fact that she wasn't yet on medication for her imbalance, she was having a rough time of things. Metaphorical example of the problems we fought about until we both broke down and had a heart-to-heart at the end of the week, which is where we calmly sat and discussed what was really bothering us. We are standing in a field of yellow daisies. Sunny out. Good mild weather. When she would decide the daisies should have been tulips, and that it's my fault we didn't find the right field. Again, metaphor showing how pointless the fight was, and I did not help the situation at all. When dealing with things that bother me, especially if it's someone I care for, I will put up a wall of jerk. Seriously, I get mean when I'm frustrated. She's anxious over nothing and thus adds to the storm. Not pretty. We are now settled in quite well and have been together for 3 years, living in the same apartment for 1.5 years. Yes, sometimes we fight over silly things, but in the end we always find a solution to the problem and then put it into action. She's learned that when I do voice a no, it's because of a good reason and no longer questions it. In turn, I show respect and do the same. If it confuses one of us, we ask later when we're at home and calm. I love this woman, and I'm secretly working on a way to propose to her. That is all. I hope this guy marries her. I'll tell you the story of how my husband won over my dad. My dad was a... I was about to say, my dad was a sailboat.
People, what is your craziest, most interesting, I need a favor, no questions asked story? Can I stand here and speak to you like we know each other? A girl was leaving a wedding reception alone from a cruise boat I worked on. I was on shore as passengers were leaving, and she came up and asked me this. I told her absolutely and jumped right into the role. She gave me a big hug and said how good it was to see me. Around then, I kept a smile on my face, but asked if something was wrong. As it turned out, there was another guest at the reception making her uncomfortable. She said he hadn't done anything specific, it was just a bad feeling. But she didn't want to go pointing him out or accusing him of anything. She just wanted to see him go to his car and leave before she went out to the lot. Once that happened, we chatted another few minutes before she was on her way. I cannot deny that it is good to go with your gut feeling in situations like this. If you've watched Patch Adams, you know. Like this person said, they didn't accuse this person of anything directly or even feel like they did anything specific, but, you know, your life is in your hands at the end of the day based on the decisions that you make. If you wanted to go about it that way, go ahead. Not me, but a family member. He was USAF with a number of people under his command and stationed in Nevada IIRC. In the middle of the night, one of his guys shows up on his porch, banging on his door as if his life depended on it. "Sir, I done messed up. I need your help to fix it. Can you come with me?" With nothing more than saying, "Son, whatever it is you need, we'll get you through it." He dons his dungarees and gets in the guy's car and they drive off into the dead of the night. He notices they are headed out of town into the desert in the pitch black of night. He tries to get the driver to talk and the guy just sort of breaks down. "I had an argument with my woman, so I drove her out into the desert and left her there. I done messed up. They'll boot me out for sure after this." The boss is doing his best to keep the guy calm, reassuring him he's going to come out of this okay. Outwardly, he's serene, but he's getting more and more anxious by the minute. They drove further and further into the desert, finally pulling off-road. They get out and the guy goes into his trunk, hands over a flashlight and points his boss towards where he left the girl. Boss starts calling out, hoping the girl was nearby, and turns to ask the airman for his girl's name. While turning, the beam of his flashlight hits the guy, and all the tumblers scarily clicked into place. The airman was carrying a shovel. In the heat of an argument, the airman strangled his gal to death and drove her out into the desert in a state of panic over what he'd done. So he went to the one guy he knew could help him set things to right, his boss. His boss that somehow now found himself helping to dig a shallow grave and trying to seem supportive. After all, here he was in the desert with a killer. Nobody knew where he was, and certain death awaited at the hands of this guy or those of Mother Nature if he couldn't keep a cool head. The officer was smart about it. He convinced the airman to bury her shallow so the scavengers could come and clean up. And so the job only took a few minutes. They go back to the car and he casually manages to leave the shovel stabbed upright into the roadside to mark the location. On the drive back into the city, the airman is almost euphoric, relieved. The boss keeps reassuring him all the way back into town, just waiting to get out of the danger zone that is the desert. As they pull into the city, the boss has his airman pull into an all-night drive-in diner and then pays for burgers, fries, and shakes. When the meal's almost done, he tells the kid, "You know what you've got to do, son. You know I can't do it for you." The guy kind of nods, walks over to the payphone, and calls the cops to confess. Yeah, the instant that they said, left her in the desert, I was just like, oh man, she dead. I was 17 and my father and mother traveled to the countryside for their 21st wedding anniversary. A few hours after they left, I got a call from my father saying he needed me to do something for him. The serious tone he used made me say, "Sure, absolutely," without knowing what he was about to ask. He told me to go out to the front where there would be a wrapped present on the foot of the driveway. He told me not to open it, look around to see if anybody was watching, then put it in my car and drive it to a commercial waste dumpster up the road and throw it out. I then had thoughts like, is my father a drug dealer? And has he gotten himself in trouble with some gang? I asked what the hell was going on, and he just reiterated that he needed me to do this for him without any questions or opening the gift. I did exactly as he asked. I picked up the gift, made sure nobody was watching, and threw it out into the appropriate dumpster. I never found out exactly what was in that box and never opened it. However, shortly after, my mother became suspicious of him having an affair. After, my father denied it, but his story unraveled over time. He was found by my mother in bed with another woman. My mum, shortly after, attempted self-deletion. They then both involved myself and my brother in painful attempts of pitting us against one parent or another. I later found out the box almost certainly just contained pictures of my father banging his mistress, whom he is now married to. I don't speak to my parents much anymore and moved interstate. I'm not sure if this person is English or not based on the way they wrote mum, M-U-M, and the talk of the countryside makes me go, oh, this person's totally freaking English, but like, then they mention moving interstate and I'm like, oh, they're American? Or maybe they're an English person who lives in America. Pretty minor considering some of the other stories here, but I have one. During the Dark Knight Rises premiere, me and my friend were close to the front of the line. Our theater was the only showing for the next 2 hours, as the other room had broken down. The people in that line were told that if there was any room left in ours, they'd be allowed in. Slim chance to none, so we start going in, and this guy at the front of the other line looks desperate. We lock eyes, and he gives me a questioning nod. I nod back, knowing what he wants. He walks straight up to me with a big smile on his face and says, "Hey man, how have you been?" I respond immediately with, "Max, good to see ya. Glad you could make it. I'm good, you?" I have no idea if that's his name, but he looks like a Max and he rolls with it. And from there we launch into small talk and shoulder claps as he walks in with me and my friends under the suspicious eye of the usher. As soon as we're in, he veers off and tells me he owes me one. My friends patiently wait until he's out of earshot and ask me, who the heck was that? I shrugged and said, no idea. When the movie ends and we walk out, we see each other, and this time he's with a girl. He hurries over to me and says he got a date with the girl and that this is the best night ever. If I ever need anything, he's my man. Never saw him again. Max was a cool guy. I hope his date went well.
Max does indeed sound like a cool guy. He deserves to be happy.
And it was very nice of that guy to, like, I don't know, give that guy a hand, I guess. It's kind of funny the things that can happen from, like, a telling look or something, or just like a mutual understanding in a single glance.
While we were hanging out, my best friend got a call from his girlfriend. Now, she hardly let him out of her sight on any given day, so having some free time to sit around, chat, and play up some games had become a vanishingly rare commodity. But now, on this particular day, she really needed him. She didn't have a car and needed him to drive her and take her somewhere right away. He went, of course. She told him she needed to go to an interview with a college she'd applied for and had forgotten about it, and she needed a ride. My friend took his girlfriend an hour away to the college, called me to chat, and picked her up again a few hours later. It turned out later that she had him drive her to the campus, cheated on him with another guy at a place a few blocks away, and then had her boyfriend drive her home after she slept with this other dude. And that was the story of how my best friend realized he was in a failing relationship. No, wait, he stayed with her 4 more months and rented a place next door to be closer to her before she broke up with him the next day after he moved in, because my friend was in love and she wasn't.
That is absolute top-tier harlot behavior. I mean, using your boyfriend as a key instrument in the process of cheating on him is downright nasty.
Been waiting for a chance to share this one. Earlier this year at around 1 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, I get a call from a friend who lives nearby. He was in a total panic and the only words he could get out to me were, "Dude, open the gate and turn off all the outside lights. Hurry!" Half asleep, I ask him if this is some kind of prank, because you know us guys, fool with each other every now and then. He responds with, "Just effing do it." I decide to comply, still in my boxers, turning off the outside lights. Now, just to add some detail, my house is right next to a traffic circle, so I go outside to the gate to see what's going on, and to my amazement, my friend comes speeding the wrong way around the circle. Halfway into making the turn, he turns off all his lights, turns off the car, and rolls into my driveway through my gate at a serious speed, shouting out the window, "Close the goddamn gate!" About 5 seconds later, I see a police car come speeding by, sirens and lights and everything. As I look back to his car, he emerges with a victoriously smug look on his face, shirt and pants covered in vomit, steering wheel covered in vomit, and the smell of straw rum making my eyes water. He looked at me, I looked at him, he nodded, I nodded. He asked to use my shower and sleep over. 5 weeks later, he totaled his car, drunk driving, and lost his job because he couldn't get to work anymore. Been sober ever since.
And I truly believe it is honestly probably for the best that friend stay the hell off the road. I used to work at a college and somehow was talked into becoming a sponsor of one of the local fraternities. No Greek letters attached to this frat. It was basically just a bunch of dudes who pooled their extra cash and were legit as far as the small school is concerned. After acting as an adult sponsor for about a year, hell, I was only 24 at the time, I get a late-night call from one of the frat members saying, "We're screwed. There is a dude in the house with a piece and he won't leave." I'm kinda drunk and don't really want to get involved. I tell him to call the cops, but he's worried because if the cops come, we will all get expelled. He was probably right. It was a small private Christian school, so I say fine, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I walked across the apartment complex and knocked on Malcolm's door. Malcolm was a gangbanger from way back who, I can say this because I am confident in my heterosexuality, is the perfect specimen of a man. Over 6 foot, over 200 pounds, and simply shredded with muscles. I tell him the problem and he says, "Cool, let's go." 10 minutes later, we walk into the party. I ask who the dude causing problems was, find out and point him out to Malcolm. Malcolm walks up to the dude and says, "You need to go." Dude looks up, sees Malcolm, and says, "Yeah, man, I was just leaving." The frat took a collection the next day and paid Malcolm's rent for the next 3 months. Malcolm was a bad mother. Maybe it's because they're just good Christian boys at a small Christian school, but it's kind of lazy that they had to call a dude to get one other dude to remove another dude from their party. I don't know how many people are usually to a fraternity. Like, naturally, I don't know. I wasn't there, but the situation just seemed handleable.
A friend who I hadn't heard from in a while calls me up saying he needs $200 and he'll give me $250 by the end of the week. He has his own business and owns houses, so I'm like, yeah, sure. Sure enough, at the end of the week, I get my $250. A week later, he asks for $600 and he'll give me $700 back. Seeing as he paid me back on time the first time, I'm like, sure, why not? A week goes by, no money. 3 months go by, with me calling him once in a while, etc. No money, and he's not picking up anymore. So I go, screw it. I go to his place, call him from my girlfriend's cell phone, and he picks up and says, "Yeah, Yeah, he's home. I go to the building he owns where he used to live. He comes over all confused. I ask him for the money. He says all he can give me is $400. This avoiding bullpucky goes on for another 2 months. I go, screw it. Go back to his place again. Says he got robbed or some bullcrap. I think he stopped the chronic and started doing the hardest stuff, to be honest. Anyways, I agree to take his spear launcher, an estimated worth of $600, as collateral for the remaining $300, and while I have not seen him in a long time, I still have the launcher.
Now, it may be debatable whether or not this transaction was actually worth it. You got 4 to 5 months of having to track and nag and follow up this dude for money, but in the end, you got a spear launcher, and cold hard cash is good, but a spear launcher is forever. Kinda silly, but I was at work one day commuting from home in a New York suburb to New York City, and my dad called me. He says, I need a favor, pick up a copy of the most recent Playboy on your way home, okay? I'll pay for it. I asked him, why? And he told me that sometimes when he asks me for things, I should just frickin' do them. Not angry, we're jokers. Turns out there was an article about someone in the wine business that he wanted to read. It was just a bonus that he could confuse the hell out of me in the process. Edit. I can't find the article online, but it was during Rudy Kurniawan's scandal. Check him out. It was apparently a big thing in the wine world, and my dad had done some work with him in the past. Though it would be hilarious if he just wanted the magazine, he did have a real excuse. Now, I don't know about the rest of you lot, but I truly believe that this man's father deceived him and simply wanted a sneaky peek at some Playboy bunnies. I live in a sketchy town with a lot of crime and homeless people. It's practically impossible to exit your apartment without seeing someone homeless. However, they're generally nice, and therefore I'm nice to them too. A few greet me when I walk by because I give them my leftovers sometimes. Well, one particular hobo and I are good friends. By friends, I mean we talked that one time when I was going home from a frat party and he told me I was eyed. Anyway, he saunters up to me one night when I was walking home and asked me to do him a favor. He wanted me to take another route home, but didn't explain why. Now, I typically don't follow instructions from the homeless in the middle of the night, but something in my gut told me to listen to him. Probably because for the first time since I've seen him, he looked sober. So I did. The next day, I heard by word of mouth that a woman was graped minus the G. I don't remember if it was also a murder or not on the route that I was going to take. That woman could have been me. I never saw Hobo Bro again after that. Now, there are 2 reasons why you may have never seen Hobo Bro again, and that's all I'm going to say on the matter.
About a year ago, my roommate asked me to squeeze her boob as hard as I can. I asked her why. She told me to just do it, so I obliged her, and she just stands there with her eyes closed for 5 seconds and then runs out of the apartment door giggling. She denies it ever happened now.
Well, I really don't know what to say, dude, except girls, women, they can be pretty weird sometimes. I thought that this was just going to lead up to her asking you to check for a cancer lump or something.
When I was 14, I was spending an unproductive summer vacation day watching TV. I was alone and was somewhat annoyed to hear a desperately loud knock at my door. As I unlocked the door, my best friend at the time rushes in and nearly pushes me over in the process. He was helping his grandma and attempted to skateboard home when diarrhea struck. This guy comes into my house and absolutely destroys my bathroom. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, not to mention his life. But the guy literally didn't ask, and he didn't need to do so. Human beings should let other human beings poop with impunity, unless it's dysentery or something.
Now I say, the poop with impunity is man's truest and greatest right, passed down from God himself.
My friend and his wife were raging snow snorters for almost 20 years. They have both been clean for 3 years, and at this point, his prostate cancer has returned after being in remission for several years. He had heart surgery about 3 months ago. A few weeks ago, he asked me if I could do him a huge favor. I told him, of course, because he was there for me when I was completely down and out and unconditionally gave what little he had when no one else could be bothered. He said, you don't even know what I'm going to ask you yet. I told him that whatever he needed, I'd make it happen. Turns out he and his wife just wanted a ride to Hackensack, New Jersey, so he could buy her a wedding ring. They've been married over 20 years and due to their drug habit have been repeatedly pawned and ultimately sold off their wedding rings. Now they're clean and I feel they believe he doesn't have much time left. He wants her to have her wedding ring. I drove them last week. He couldn't get his legs in the car without help. After they went in and picked out the purchased rings, he couldn't get out of the car to get lunch and pick up the rings when they were ready an hour later. It was a huge effort for him to take that ride and walk without his wheelchair. He spent all his savings on that set of rings. I took a few hours from work and we had a picnic in a park in Hackensack. It wasn't a favor or an inconvenience. I felt lucky they asked. When you're bereft of good health, it's a good thing if you have good friends to make the short time that you have as wonderful as possible. A friend asked me to store some cooking equipment and related supplies. Bowls, pans, cooking utensils, some wine, whatnot. Turns out he'd been getting some as a kind of bonus from his boss. Except his boss's boss wasn't aware of this, and then the police got involved. Felt zero guilt. Got a nice $500 bottle of wine out of it. Then my brother's alcoholic girlfriend drank it one night. Doesn't even remember it. Just wanted more stuff to get her drunk. I will never forgive her. Edit. Since this is supposed to be a no questions asked story, I do have to admit that I did ask one question. When he said he needed me to store these things, including wine, I have a spot, but it's not refrigerated. Is that okay? To this day, he still chuckles about how that was the only part of this favor that I was concerned about. Edit 2. I know some people are probably curious as to what exactly the deal was, so here's a more detailed explanation that I got after the fact. My friend was a chef at a high-end 4-star restaurant. Now, at a place like this, they are really serious about both health codes and presentations. So the amount of equipment they went through monthly was pretty significant. Scratch a mixing bowl, chuck it. Dent in a saucepan, chuck it. Even the slightest blemish on something the customer would see, it's gone. A lot of this stuff wound up with the staff at their homes. That wasn't all of the stuff that wound up at their homes. But the point is more that it's not like this stuff wandering off was really eating into the bottom line. Or at least, that's what my friend and most of the rest of the staff thought. Now, on his own, he probably wouldn't have taken much of anything home past the odd dented, scratched dish and whatnot, but his boss openly encouraged staff to use the employee equipment discount for basic stuff and even the occasional bottle of wine when an employee really stepped up during a busy night or something else. The boss did the same himself, so nobody thought much of it. Flash forward a few months, and one night the boss is mysteriously absent. Eventually, they come to find he's down at the police station being interviewed on suspicion of felony theft. Everyone on staff is thinking this is a huge overreaction on some upper level person's part, an attempt to scare the staff straight and kill off the employee equipment discount bonus in one go. Then they got more details. So at the time, my friend had taken a total of 6 of those bottles of wine and thought that was probably abusing things a bit. His boss had taken whole cases of wine. My buddy had maybe 8 creme brulee dishes. The boss had a few dozen. Pick an example of something my friend thought was on the border. The boss had 5 to 20 times as much, and that was just over the last year. So long story still long, they quickly realized that the police investigation was legitimate, and they were all likely accomplices. A few people panicked and tossed all their stuff. Some, like my friend, decided to hide it until things were a bit less crazy. Importantly, nobody talked. So only the boss went down for it.
Damnable sticky-fingered gremlin boss giving me random crap and trying to take me down with him. That would suck so hard. Don't know how familiar you guys are with how underage college parties work, but when the police bust in, usually for a noise complaint, nothing happens. But my buddy was at a party at one of our more sketchy friends' houses, and the police bust in, find booger sugar, and the 3 to 4 cops start trying to process and arrest the whole party. He is luckily in the back. They haven't seen him yet, so he texts me saying to come to that house in a specific spot. Turn my lights off and text him. So I do, and I watch him leap out of a second-floor window and run into my car. And upon seeing the 2 cop cars as I drive off, I ask my first question. That being, what in the figgity yuck? He gave me a bottle of Grey Goose for my trouble. That's a pretty good friend to give you a bottle of Grey Goose for your trouble. My first question would be, where was my invitation to this party? Got a call from a friend at 4 in the morning one night declaring that he needed some help. We both lived in the same dorm at the time, and I figured he was just trying to get in without being seen by the resident assistant drunk, because we were both underage at the time. My groggy butt didn't ask any questions and went down to the side door to let him in. He wasn't there though. I looked around, called his name a couple times, smoked a cig, and went back inside because it was cold as Santa's balls outside. I tried calling him again to no avail and ended up going to his room to see if his roommate knew where he was. Turns out he was in there, naked, handcuffed to the bed with a gag around his neck that he
spat out. I laughed so hard I woke the neighbors up, and then they laughed with me. We let him out and he proceeded to tell us this story of this fine woman getting all frisky on him and handcuffing him to a bed. Apparently she was on top, and right before he got lucky, she hopped off, laughed at him, and told him to figure it out when he asked how he was getting out. That's when he laid there for what he said was 3 hours trying to get his phone from his desk at the foot of the bed to his face so he could call. Felt bad for him, but never letting him live that one down.
Life's a matter of perspective, and I would much rather be this dude than the guy that got stranded in a desert in the dodged a bullet video I recorded. I'm just gonna say that.
Reddit. What's your best, no time to explain, let's go story? I'll start. Happened back when I was 16 to 17. Was hanging late one night at an out-of-the-way basketball court with 3 of my very attractive female friends. We were just shooting some hoops and talking when someone suggested a game of strip basketball. The 3 girls wanted to be on a team together, so they told me I could go choose anyone I wanted for my second. Naturally, I bolted for my high school's basketball team captain's house. Pounded on his door at 10 p.m., sweating and out of breath, and said, "No time to explain, let's go." I didn't know him very well, and he had no reason to go with me, but we were both happy he did. The girls weren't happy with my choice, but they kept their word, and we got a nice show. Your turn. A few years back, my brother pulled up to my house with a paintball gun and told me to get in. He hands me the gun and says, "You'll know when to shoot." We go on a short drive to a corner where some kids began to egg his truck. I knew when to shoot. My archaeology crew and I were stuck in La Paz, Bolivia because of civil unrest that cut the roads leading to our dig site. We had been hanging out in La Paz for 2 weeks, trying to stay as warm as possible and waiting for any opening in the demonstrations. The Bolivian army fired into a crowd, killing several demonstrators, and both sides called a truce for 24 hours. That morning, our professor ran into our rented apartment and yelled for us to grab all our gear. We have 5 minutes to leave. We had no idea what was going on. The prof took the next combi, and my poor Spanish skills meant I couldn't ask questions of my fellow passengers. We boarded one of the first combis out of La Paz and headed out to the Altiplano. On the road, we passed huge roadblocks, burning tires, piles of broken glass, and various debris with just enough room for a small car to make it through. We made it far enough to hike the remaining 12 hours to the site next day, and then we started digging. Went to a bar with some friends and my parents in my hometown for my 21st birthday. Turns into a good 6 hours of drinking. Went to the bathroom, and while closing the lid after finishing, the entire bottom of the bowl shatters. I was legally drunk for my first time at said bar and proceeded to urge very loudly that we needed to leave. "No, I don't think you understand. I destroyed a toilet. Let's go." A group of bigots named Homo Sex is Sin visit Georgia Tech about every year to tell everyone why gays will burn in hell, women engineers are witches, blah blah blah. When I saw they were in front of the student center, I ran back to my place to find my camera and stereo. My friend was passed out right next to both items, still hungover from the night previous. I shook him and said, "Put on the smallest boxers you own and follow me." This is what happened. What follows is a link to a video where the 2 men are dancing in their smallest boxers in front of the bigots, set to techno music as a crowd cheers them on. Godspeed, you beautiful people. When I was 8, my parents took me over to their friend's house for an early dinner party. They had a daughter my age who was also my friend. She was really into animals and nature, so she wanted me to go with her about a block down her street to investigate a bird's nest she saw earlier in a tree. We go, she starts climbing while I'm on the ground watching. Then, about half a block away, this hippie-looking surfer dude with long blonde hair and wearing nothing but shorts walks out of his house and notices us. I notice him for about 2 seconds and then look back up in the tree at my friend. Next, I hear a loud whistle, and when I look back in the direction of the surfer dude, he has his shorts down around his ankles with his willy whacker out in all its glory. I yell, "Run!" My friend is clueless, but somehow she manages to jump out of the tree and we run back to her house as fast as our pint-sized legs will carry us. Luckily, my dad and her dad were right inside, and when I yelled, "There's a naked man chasing us," they were outside almost immediately. They find the surfer dude standing right in front of their driveway. I remember my dad saying, "Hey man, are you pulling your pants down in front of children?" And the guy responding with something like, "Screw you, man," and then walking away. The amazing thing is that we called the cops and they came over to file a report, but they recommended not pressing charges because the guy knew where we lived and might seek revenge. This was back in the mid-1970s. Hurricane Charlie. Was going to do a normal ride out the storm situation and play video games and eat junk food all weekend while it rained outside. I got a call from a buddy who said the hurricane just turned 90 degrees and made landfall in Sanibel, like 20 to 25 miles away. I rushed into my roommate's room and said, grab 2 days worth of clothes. We're getting the heck out of here. When we came back to the house, it had been destroyed. The roof leaked and held water in the ceiling until it completely caved in, completely destroying everything we had in there. Not sure if this counts, but I was in high school and espied a hot girl waiting for the bus. Being me and knowing I would just awkward all over myself if I tried things the normal way, I got on my best panicked face, ran up to her, and said, Quick! There's no time! I need your phone number! She blurted it out. I actually kept it in my head until I could get it down on paper and called her that night. We've been together for 13 years. I own a skate shop, and it was also a popular hangout for skater kids. I was off one day, and I get a call from an ecstatic skate kid that sounded in panic, saying, Get to the shop now! Click. I rushed down there 2 minutes later. Anthony Kiedis walks into the shop. One of the kids had run into him in town and convinced him to come into the shop. All the skater kids are in my shop behind the counter with my employee, pretending to work on things, put skateboards together, etc. It was hilarious to see them try to act naturally, and we all got to have a good conversation with Anthony Kiedis about skating, paddleboarding, and kiteboarding. He signed a girl's skate deck for our wall of fame that I still have. He's been back every year since then and is a regular customer. This past summer, I delivered paddleboards out to his vacation home. For the uninformed like I was before I read this post, Anthony Kiedis is the lead singer of Red Hot Chili Peppers. And now, it's time for a pheasant tangent. Got a phone call from my sister one evening, and when I picked up the phone, she was clearly running and out of breath. I could just make out her saying, "Open the front door," before the line went dead. So I ran to the front door, picking up the heaviest thing I could find along the way. It was a climbing helmet. Wrenched the door open and moved out the way just in time to see her bolting into the house past me. I slammed the door and wait for her to catch her breath. There was a giant pheasant chasing me all the way from Tesco. Don't worry, ma'am. I've got this. With that, I donned the climbing helmet and told her to call the police if I wasn't back in 5 minutes. When I was a kid, my village had an evil jerk of a pheasant that would chase old ladies down the street. You could look out of the window and it will be strutting around the village square waiting for a pensioner to attack. Anyway, one day I was out in the garden with my dad, who was plucking a dead pheasant, and this devil bird jumped up onto the high fence and looked at us. I'm not kidding when I say it had the craziest look in its eye. I asked my dad to use my water pistol to blast it, so he pumped it to full power and shot the pheasant in the chest. This crazy bird just gripped the fence for the entire time it was being savaged by the jet of water from my Super Soaker 2000. It didn't fall off and only flew off of its own accord about 10 minutes later. Then a day later I saw it dead in the road. When I was about 13, my buddy and I rode our bikes to the local Kmart to be bored, obnoxious teenagers. Real quick, this story is from 11 years ago, so oh my god, I feel old now. Anyway, tossed some Nerf footballs over the aisles, ran around, mocked things. Then I thought it would be funny to spray my buddy with the perfume sample. He didn't think it was funny at all and started chasing me. I ran and hid, and the hunt was on. Using his finest ninja skills, he snuck around until he saw me, crouched down in the hardware aisle. He crept up behind me, put his butt right next to my head, and let rip. He turned around to gloat, and it wasn't me. Just some poor schmuck looking at hammers. The next thing I know, he runs by me. We gotta go. I was in high school, and my friend came running up to me and said, "No time to explain. I need your shoes." I spent the rest of the day walking around the school in socks and some makeshift shoes made out of a cardboard box. I later found out that the reason why my friend needed my shoes was so that he could participate in his chem lab class and not fail due to his not wearing shoes. Me and my friend are heading to Sonic for lunch. Suddenly he screams, "Pull over!" pointing across the road and across 2 lanes of traffic. Why? No time to explain. Go! So I hit the gas and barely avoid getting creamed. Across the way, I see what he noticed first, a man holding down a woman in the dirt near the ditch beside the road and striking her. We start to get out, he sees us, lets her go, and gets in his car. A moment later, another car pulls up and some older women swarm over the struck woman as he begins to drive away. We hop in our car and give chase. I hand him my phone, he calls the cops. We end up leading the way on a car chase with officers slowly assembling en masse behind us. Finally, we chase him to a house and block the driveway with our car as he gets out and runs behind the house. Knowing we have no right to chase, we let the police take it from there, but we checked the car. It had kids in it. The police interviewed us later, told us that the kids belonged to the woman, and if we hadn't followed the man, they might not have found the car. Felt like big heroes. Best part was, on the way home, we helped a fellow with a broken radiator, and in the middle of getting him taken care of, the police called us after they caught him, and I got to say this awesome line. "Bro, that was Officer X. They need us down at the station." Broken radiator guy was all, "Who are you?" My brother is 11 years older than me and stayed with my dad with my parents divorced, so I never really got to live with him when we were young. When I was about 14, he barged into my room at 4 a.m. and told me to pack your crap for 4 days. Our flight leaves in 2 hours. Soon after, I was on a plane. Turns out he had planned us a trip to Colorado to go snowboarding and told no one but my mom 1 hour before he told me. My dad, working in the World Trade Center, heard a huge crash several floors above him. Boss looks at him and says, "No time. Let's go." He lived. About 11 or 12 years ago, I was taking my dog for a walk in the forest behind the local elementary school. He seemed all anxious to get off leash, so I unleash him since I figure he wants to run around and pee on everything. The moment I let him off leash, he starts barking at me. In hindsight, my best guess is what he was trying to convey was no time to explain, let's go, and then he bolts. I'm ticked off and start chasing after him, but he was fast, even by dog standards. Turns out on the other side of the woods, there was a middle-aged guy who had exposed himself to a group of young girls. They ran away screaming, and he was trying to make a grab for one of them. It was at this moment that my dog came bursting out of the woods like Lassie or Rin Tin Tin or some crap. My dog was popular among the kids, so they knew him. They screamed his name and ran towards him. The pedo bailed, with his Johnson still hanging out of his pants. I was fully prepared to reprimand my dog for being a jerk. Then I found out what happened. He got steak for dinner. Freshman year in college at a school in Boston. Sick as a dog. Newfound ROTC friend with similar taste as myself comes running into my room and tells me he needs me. I tell him I'm sick and can't go anywhere. He refuses my denial and forces me to come with him. Flash forward 45 minutes in a car, and we are arriving at Gillette Stadium. Turns out there is a Halo 3 tournament being held for Army recruitment purposes. He is very aware of my Halo skills due to the sleepless nights we spent when Halo 3 first came out. Ended up placing second, and along the way beating Jared Mayo. He was physically upset and said he wanted to kill me. Felt awesome to beat a professional football player at something. All of this occurred in the box seating of an empty stadium, which we have an amazing view of. So surreal. Army recruitment via Halo 3? Are we fighting the Flood? Is Area 51 home to the Flood?
Wake up, sheeple! The government is hiding aliens under our freaking noses!
My wife and I went to Scandinavia in the winter for our honeymoon. First Copenhagen, then Helsinki, then northern Finland. Yes, this is an odd choice. Our flight got diverted, and en route to Copenhagen, our luggage, including all of our winter gear, was lost, and the airline was unable to locate it for the 4 days we were in Copenhagen. However, we made friends with one of the customer service agents at the airport. We returned to the airport on the day of our flight to Helsinki, still with no luggage, and dreading the Arctic cold we were about to fly into. Temperatures were in the single digits in Finland, but unable to do anything about it. Magically, we found our luggage at the airport that morning, and went through security to our gate. It was about half an hour before boarding when our friend from customer service on the other side of the airport ran out to us and said, "Follow me and don't ask any questions. We don't have much time and there is something I must do for you." Then he led us through a series of back hallways in the airport to his office. "What I'm about to tell you, you must tell no one else," he said. "In 20 minutes, our pilots are going to announce a strike and all our flights will be grounded." This was in no way public knowledge. He put us on another flight to Helsinki with a different airline, and we watched in gratitude and amazement from the Finnair terminal as the strike was announced, and our original flight, along with every single other SAS flight leaving Copenhagen, was grounded. Epilogue: we found ourselves in Copenhagen again a year later, and we went to the airport specifically to try and find our friend and thank him, but it was his day off. I'd ask Reddit to pass on my thanks, but I'm pretty sure what he did was against company policy, and I wouldn't want to get him in trouble for doing a good deed for a young couple. I was at a house party over the summer that started going a bit south, so my friend and I decided to just get in the car and drive home. We got to the car and were waiting for the third guy in our group when a very, very drunk guy came up with his red solo cup of beer. We were friendly to him, asked him what he was drinking and all. He decided the best reaction to this was to throw the beer at me while I sat in the car. After this happened, I noticed a group of about 7 or 8 more drunk people ambling towards the car. They did not look happy. My friend decided the best response to this was to go to the back of his car, grab his shotgun and 2 shells. Oh crap. He stood next to his car with the drunk people slowly approaching and yelled at them once, "Get away from my car," while loading the shells. They did not stop. He fired once into the air away from them, cocked the gun, and said again, "Get away from my car." About a third of them left after that, so he fired once more and the rest scattered. He had just fired a gun at a house party. Twice. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Our friend then came out of the house screaming. No time to explain, let's go. We never went back to that house. TLDR, nearly drunken brawl broken up by shotgun. Walking home from playing football in the park, and my dad, aggressively speeding down the road in his car, brakes hard next to me. He looks angry as heck, and my little brother is crying, and he sternly says, "Get in." I roll with it, and he speeds around the park looking attentively out the window. My little brother points at a group of lads, maybe 16 to 17 years old. One of them is running with my little brother's glasses. He's only about 10 years old. My dad jumps out of the car, rugby tackling the lad to the floor. My dad is huge, and the lads look petrified. My dad absolutely bawls at them for about 5 minutes, and after that, he gets back in the car, and then we go to McDonald's. Dads out there listening to this right now, if you aren't willing to body slam someone for your kid, what are you doing with your life? I was at a sporting event with some friends. Wow, it was 10 years ago. Now I feel old. The bleachers were metal benches on concrete and set up amphitheater style, going down a hill and all the concessions and bathrooms on the top of the hill behind us. It's about halftime and I'm thirsty. I also see that it's starting to cloud up. I tell my friends I'm gonna go grab a drink and be right back. I walk to the top of the stairs and I see the biggest, nastiest thundercloud I have ever seen, and it's about to crap bricks right on top of us. I hauled it down the stairs, grab the friend closest to the aisle, and yell, "We gotta go." It takes a second for it to register, but everyone grabs the important stuff and then follows me up the stairs, across the food court, and into the bathroom. Suddenly, the temperature drops by at least 10 degrees. The wind gusts. The last friend in almost lost her hat. Seconds later, we hear a huge clang on the tin roof of the bathroom. And then another, and then another. Then out the door, we see golf ball to orange-sized hail everywhere. TLDR, I saved my friends from being caught in bleachers in a nasty hailstorm. It was the middle of the night on a road trip with a friend. She's a city mouse, I'm country. I was driving, she was sleeping, and I started to get sleepy. So I pulled off the highway onto a barely paved road and followed it for a while until I found a wide shoulder to pull off. I parked and we got out so she could have a cigarette. There were loads of stars and we leaned against the car having one of those hushed middle-of-the-night conversations. Then, I heard rustling in the woods 8 feet from us. At first I ignored it, but then I realized there was a pattern. I'd hear it at the 10 position, then at 2, then back to 10. It was more than one thing making the rustling noise, and they were getting closer. And I realized something was hunting us. So I put on my power voice and told her, "Get in the car." Her eyes got wide and she hopped in really quick. I jumped in and we took off back to the highway. She turned to me and asked, "Was it an axe murderer or something?" I told her no, it was probably wolves. And she got mad at me for scaring her. She didn't see how wild animals stalking us could possibly be dangerous. Doing some bodywork on a Cessna 350 when my buddy comes running into the shop with his eyes nearly bugging out of his head. "Goldfish, come on, follow me." "What is it? I'm busy." "Just come here. I have to finish this work. Is it important? Just follow me. It's important. I'm not going unless you tell me what it is first." Cake! Turns out it was somebody's birthday at work and there was free cake in the break room. If somebody could take that cake soundbite and turn it into Space Core from Portal, I would love you forever. So, I had a job driving a taxi, night shift. I'm waiting in the cab lineup for my next fare when a native Indian stumbles up to my taxi, asks me if I want to buy some beer. No thanks, pal. You sure? I'll sell you a case for $15. Keep in mind, I'm in Canada, and a case will normally cost around $40. I say sure, and he hops in and tells me to drive around the corner to the golf course. I'm skeptical, but I go for it. We arrive, and he runs into some bushes and comes out with a 24-pack of beer. I laugh, pay him, and ask if there's more. Yeah, if you buy 10, I'll sell them to you for $10 each. I gave him $190 more. He runs towards the bushes, looks back at me and yells, "Well, you gonna come help me with them or what?" I follow him to the bushes, and there is a skid full of cases of beer. We take 19 more and load them into the back of my taxi van. I get the nice gentleman's phone number for next time, and we say our goodbyes. Fast forward 15 minutes. I've driven home. It's 3 a.m. I was living in a house in a row of townhomes. Neighbors surely hear me pull up, open and slam my door. I run in, wake up my roommate, and yell, "No time to explain, let's go." He rushes downstairs, puts on shoes, and follows me back to the cab. I open the rear doors and his jaw drops. "Where did you find this?" "No time to explain," I respond. So here we are, my half-naked friend and I running 20 cases of beer from the street to my house at 3 a.m. I am amazed that no neighbors had awoken and looked out their windows and called the phone number on the van. When we finished and I had time to explain, my roommate gave me $200 and we went and got another 20 cases, this time from a skid hidden behind some trees at a park on a local lake. TLDR, bought 20 cases of beer from an Indian, woke up roommate at 3 a.m. to help rush it into our house. We built a wall between our kitchen and living room with cases of said beer.
What's the most significant "you just messed with the wrong person" moment you've witnessed or experienced? I stopped in Reno overnight while moving across the country. Had everything I own in a little beater I bought for the trip. All night, I'm keeping an eye on the parking lot. There's a cop car in the lot. Sure enough, late that night, I see a shady guy walking slowly along the line of parked cars, scoping them out. To my surprise, he decides the cop car is the one he wants to break into. So he takes off his shirt, wraps it around his arm, and starts hitting the window with his forearm. I call the front desk and let them know what's going on. The lady says she's calling the cops. I tell her it's a cop car he's trying to break into, and ask if there's a cop staying in the hotel. She says that she'll check. About 30 seconds later, a very angry man in his boxers thunders out of his room and tackles the dude. He messed with the wrong person. Why of all the cars would he decide that the cop car was the one to break into? That just sounds like a bad plan from the start. My father recently told me a story about this jerk who he works with driving trucks for different distributors. They have no smoking areas because of food productions and things like that, but this jerk decided to smoke there anyway, putting his butts out in a styrofoam cup. Anyway, after a while, his truck was loaded, and he decided to just throw the cup out the window after getting his truck, when a man walked past and asked him calmly to pick up the cup and put it in the bin. To which this intellectual giant of a driver says, "If it's so important, why don't you put it in the bin?" before driving off. Without making much of a reaction, he picked it up, walked to the bin, then makes his way back inside. When my father gets back to the main truck depot, he sees this driver getting yelled at by his boss. Turns out there was a conference being held with some overseas members of the company and the CEO. The CEO whom was told to pick up the cup. They instantly barred the driver from the site and all associated sites, and my father's boss had to jump through hoops to not lose the contract renewal. I can't imagine the level of ecstasy that CEO would have felt during the whole situation, knowing that this prick doesn't know who he is. When I was a senior in high school, I was at some house party. There was this chick named Rachel there, a notoriously crazy girl who was known for causing trouble anywhere she went. She was also a pretty big girl, maybe 5'9" with broad shoulders. Anyway, out of nowhere, she just starts screaming at another girl, Sarah, a shorter, skinny thing, who was honestly on the other side of the room doing absolutely nothing. Rachel gets up in her face, starts cussing her out, and pushing her multiple times, obviously just trying to start something for the heck of it. Rachel finally decides to throw a punch, and I kid you not, like a flash of lightning, Sarah just launches at Rachel, starts beating the crap out of her face, knocks her on her butt butt and strongholds Rachel's hair and starts slamming her skull on the brick fireplace in the house. I think she must have knocked Rachel out for a minute, because Sarah decided she was done and just stood up and walked away. Turns out Sarah's older sister was a competitive female boxer and showed her a thing or two about fighting. Lesson learned: just because they're small doesn't mean they can't beat the crap out of you. There's this old, miserable looking man with a nickel who seems to just ride the subway all day. The nickel man only seems to have one purpose in his life. He sticks out his hand with a nickel on his palm and he just points it at you. It's like he's asking for you to look at his plain old nickel. He's like a reverse panhandler. One night, I was coming home drunk and saw the nickel guy. He was doing his usual rounds and he came to me. He stuck out his hand and, like usual, you just let him be. But I was tipsy and I pulled the nickel out of his hand. Within seconds, he went from normal nickel guy to crazy rip your face off yelling angry gorilla man. Once I put it back, he became normal nickel guy again. I was mortified. The nickel's obviously very important to him. He just wants to show it off. One night during my junior year of high school, some of my buddies came by and asked if I wanted to go party with them. I didn't know the person throwing the party, but I said screw it and went with them anyway. It turned out to be one of the most surreal nights of my life. We got there and only knew a handful of people out of the 50 or so people that were there. There were a lot of people from different schools, so I knew that eventually something was going to happen. Soon after, one kid, we'll call him Ron, pulls out a piece and starts bragging about how his parents bought it for him and no one should mess with him. Then he starts pointing it at people to show off the laser sight on it. The guy throwing the party, we'll call him John, saw this and told him to stop pointing it at people. Ron said something like, "Screw off, don't tell me what to do, I do what I want." It got a little heated, but then it all seemed to get worked out and Ron put it away. About 5 minutes later, Ron had the piece out again, and trying to be slick and prove he was a bad boy, pointed it right at John's back. When he did, John just happened to turn and saw Ron pointing it at him. I don't remember his exact words, but John said something to the effect of, "Oh, you want to mess with me? I'll be right back." He started jogging to the house. We were in the front yard. And I told my friends, we need to leave. This is about to get crazy. While John was jogging to the house and while he was inside, Ron seemed confident at first. But then he realized he'd gotten himself in a terrible situation and started to walk quickly to his car. John was not far behind, however, with a much bigger piece of his own. Ron got to his car and got in, but he was blocked in and couldn't move. John walked up to the car and tapped on the window. Ron cracked the window about an inch and was crying, probably begging for his life. All while John calmly talked to him. I couldn't hear what was said, but I did hear John finally say, "Stop crying, you look like a real wuss." He started to walk away, but then all of a sudden he stopped, turned around, and fired at Ron's face from about 8 to 10 feet away. We all thought for sure that we had just witnessed a murder and scattered like roaches when you turn the lights on. I remember looking back and seeing John calmly walking back into the house while everyone was running around him. That was what freaked me out the most. His calmness. Turns out Ron lived, and John was charged with attempted murder and a few other things. Ron had reconstructive surgery to repair some of the damage, but he was badly disfigured. I don't remember if John was found guilty or not, but I do remember hearing that Ron won a settlement from John's family. He bought a new Cadillac and whatever else he wanted, but he was super depressed about his disfigured face and got hammered constantly. He died in a single car drunk driving accident not too long after. I'll never forget that night. That got insanely out of control. Those are not toys. You don't just wave them around. And you definitely don't use them unless it is absolutely necessary. I live in front of a hospital parking lot. Some guy in an expensive car cut in line. A lady in a van was super peeved and kept honking. He got out to calm her down. She got out, ripped off her wig, and started screaming and pointing at the cancer center entrance. He looked like he wet himself and got back in his car. Still stayed where he'd cut in line though. My father and his brother, who were both 6'6", were riding in my uncle's tiny little Chevette, and a guy got road rage and chased them into a parking lot. You could almost see the guy fill his pants when they unfolded themselves out of the car. My dad always tells me this story of how you should never get out of your car after a road rage incident. My mom and him were driving to the city when another driver didn't give my dad the right of way. He almost crashed into my parents, and my mom was pregnant at the time. So of course my dad was angry out of his mind. My dad, being a pretty big dude, wasn't exactly someone to mess with, but out of the little car that almost crashed into my parents, got a man that my dad described as a freaking giant. Dad quickly got back in the car and kept driving. He always gets embarrassed when he tells the story, because my mom still laughs at the face he made when that giant got out of his tiny car. Two drunk guys were bugging this local busker, trying to get him to fight them, saying all sorts of racist stuff. The busker was black. The busker just lost it. Obviously, he had to deal with a ton of drunk jerks. He picked up his guitar and hit one of the drunk guys across the face with it. I called the police when I saw it, and later got called in to give evidence against the drunk guys, who got arrested, saying that they started it. I mean, hey, you got what you asked for. I was covering a hockey game as a sports reporter when I saw the single best retaliation of my life. In my state, if you're female and you want to play hockey with the boys, you can. Typically, the serious girl hockey players will play in these leagues because the girls-only hockey leagues are kinda crap. There was this girl named Alex who I covered since she was a freshman, and she was really good. She'd played since she was a kid, was on some really good travel teams, competed in national camps, got a college scholarship for the sport, and played 4 years in college. Anyway, during her junior year, I'm covering an away game at this crappy arena, and her school is playing one of its rivals, so I know it's going to be a chippy game. It did not disappoint. This big tough boy notices she's a girl, or had played against her before, and spends the first 2 periods basically trying to intimidate her by checking her hard into the boards whenever she has the puck, and generally doing all the things you know someone is doing to antagonize you. Now, I've seen this girl play, and I know she isn't going to tolerate that, so I just sit and wait for the moment that she snaps. It comes in the 3rd period. The jerk comes running full speed from one side of the ice to the other and gives her one of the worst cheap shot checks I've ever seen. She hits the boards hard, lands on the ice, and the crowd yells because the refs either didn't see it or didn't care, and the play breaks the other way, so everyone else is moving away from them. She doesn't miss a beat though. Calmly, I watch her pick herself up, and the jerk hockey player must have said something to her to cause her to snap, because she takes her helmet off and goes his way. At this point, I can tell he thinks he's going to dismiss this sweet little girl and tell her to play with dolls or something, but he never gets the chance. She socks him right in the jaw and starts beating the crap out of him. It was absolutely amazing. He must have had maybe 50 pounds on her, but she didn't care and beat his butt handily. And because the refs were on the other side of the ice, it took a little bit of time to break them up. She got ejected, he got ejected, but he sulked out of the arena knowing full well he got his butt kicked by a girl. It was phenomenal. 2 kids about 11 years old were bullying this 9-year-old kid by instigating their little sister to go hit and kick him, with the threat that they would beat him up with a hockey stick if he retaliated. The poor 9-year-old pleaded with them to stop, but when they wouldn't, he charged the kid with the hockey stick, took it from him, chased them off, and threw the stick over the fence, then continued to saunter home. I witnessed this from about 50 feet away at age 13. It took place in about a minute, and while I was contemplating a way to help the kid out, he just took matters into his own hands like a G. That kid was not one to mess with. When I was about 10 or so, there was a cricket in my house that I shot with a Nerf gun from a prone position. It dodged it, then jumped at me, and I got up in a panic so fast, the gun flung from my hand into the kitchen, breaking a few glasses. I never messed with crickets again. Didn't you know? Crickets are vicious, dude. I was working in a sketchy part of Albuquerque when I realized a guy was following me through the parking lot. I started walking faster, and so did he. I knew I wasn't going to get to my car before he reached me, so I took a knife out of my purse and turned around and shoved it in his face and yelled, "I'm from Wisconsin, I can gut a deer!" The dude took off, and I got in my car shaking. That's a really scary moment. I'm glad you were able to defend yourself and got away safely. I lost it at a Subway a while back. This story isn't about me losing it at a person myself, but I found someone who could and did. The Subway I go to is inside a skating rink, and on this day, it was flooded with newly pubescent boys thinking that treating people like absolute crap is how you act like a macho man. One girl behind the counter was near tears, and the other woman was trying to hold her own ground against a bunch of around 13-year-olds. It was stuff like, "You witch, I didn't ask for mayo. Are you blind? For crap's sake, that's not toasted enough. When I get a job, I'm gonna be making more than you." Just a taste of some of what I heard. So I went out to the lobby of the skating rink and found a woman nearby and asked her if she was with the boys in Subway, which she was, and then I told her to follow me. The look on the boys' faces when she let out her angered screech after listening to them was friggin' priceless. She made the boys pay for their own food. One boy didn't even get to finish making his sandwich, with the woman saying, "Wrap it up how it is and he'll pay for it." And from what I gathered as she practically dragged them out of there was the boys who weren't hers, she was going to speak to their parents, followed by strong protests as she told them to pack their crap, as she was taking them home early. I left the girls at Subway a nice tip and they gave me a cookie. Never mess with an angry mom. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at that moment. That's gotta be the worst kind of jerk there is. The group of 13-year-olds who think they've just got the world figured out and that they're better than you even though they have not accomplished anything. Their kryptonite is their mother, and I love watching that moment. When I played hockey, I got kicked out of a game early, so I had to watch it from the stands. A guy from the other team was chasing one of my teammates around the ice, slashing him, trying to get him to fight. Finally, my buddy dropped his gloves and proceeded to give this dude a man-sized butt whooping. That teammate went on to become an enforcer in the NHL. We're getting a lot of hockey stories today, but I guess that is the one sport where you're technically allowed to fight the other team. After drinking and partying in the haunch outside our base in Japan, my friend and I went to the on-base taxi stand to go back to the barracks. We hail and start climbing into the first open cab we see. This drunken white guy was running for it, but we beat him to it, and we didn't even see him. Anyway, he's furious and starts yelling at us. 2 girls, 1 Latina, the other black. "You stupid friggin' N-word!" And then a group of about 6 black sailors come around the corner to the stand. I don't know how it happened. Maybe Paul Mooney summoned them. Anyway, white guy changed his mind and ends up walking/running to the ships. A fight didn't end up breaking out, but he came really close to getting his butt whooped. I work at a restaurant and 4 punks decided to dine and ditch. They ran out and got away, but luckily I overheard one of their names while they were eating. Long story short, I tracked him down on Twitter, and the direct messages went like this. Me. Haha, nice try. We know who you are. You owe us $40. Bring the money or we're reporting you to the police and your school. You have until Sunday night. 1 minute later. I'm terribly sorry for this horrible incident. I'm bringing the money right now. I'm terribly sorry. It wasn't even my idea. I had no choice but to run also, or else I'm in trouble. We left the bag of money. 15 minutes later after I sent the message, a guy literally opened the front door and threw a Ziploc bag full of $40 of cash and change into the restaurant and ran away. Tools. I bet they thought it was real friggin' funny at the time, too. I work in a law office and regularly have to file documents with the court. I've learned from watching one interaction not to mess with the clerks at the filing window. A lot of people probably don't know or wouldn't believe how detailed the rules are for submitting documents to the court. There are rules regarding the type of paper you can use, the exact spacing of the heading on the paper, the exact measurements of the 2-hole punches at the top of the sheet, all kinds of things. There are literally dozens of rules on how to format your filings. In my experience, these rules are rarely enforced. The clerks will reject documents if there are major errors, missing signatures, or filled out incorrectly, things like that. But will usually let things slide like your 2-hole punches not being precisely 2 3/4 inches apart. But there was one day where I saw a clerk take sweet revenge against someone who had it coming. I was standing in line waiting to file something, and a notoriously huge jerk of an attorney got called up to the window. The clerk asked him something like, "I'm really sorry, Mr. Jerk, but you're missing some attachments to this form." He reacts as if she had just stood from her chair, flipped him the bird, and went and pooped on his mom's grave. He starts yelling about how she didn't know what the heck she was doing, and that a trained monkey could do her job, that he would complain to her supervisor, and on and on and on. He goes stomping away, and she looks much calmer than you would expect for someone who just got reamed out by this enormous jerk. I get called up to her window and say something like, "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." She replies, "It's fine, he's on my list now." I'm curious, so I ask what she means. Her response was fantastic. She says, "Mr. Jerk handles a lot of family law cases. He'll be wanting to file things here, and his paperwork is bound to land on my desk. For people like him, I get out the formatting sections of the rules of court, and I make sure he's followed every one of them." She points to my filing and says, "Your 2 hole punches look off. You see how one is higher than the other? There's supposed to be a certain distance from the top of the page. I'm not going to reject yours, but next time he drops something off at the filing box, you better believe I'm going to bust out my ruler." I let her know that I think that's awesome. But once he's seen the reason his document was rejected, he'll just have an assistant fix it or whatever. She replies, "We don't have to tell him why it was rejected specifically, just that it violated some rule of formatting. He can figure that out for himself, if he ever wants to have another document filed." She looked so happy. This woman has got to be one of the most petty, evil, conniving people I've ever heard of. I want to travel the world with her.
Where do you draw the line with charity? I was in Chicago a few years ago with my husband, my daughter, and her fiance. We went to Giordano's for pizza. Anyway, we ordered way too much food, and the pizza, when it arrived, was like 2 inches thick. We'd had so many starters that we could only eat 1 piece each of the 2 pizzas, so we got to-go boxes. As we were walking along, this woman came up and told us she was really hungry and could we help her out giving her some money. Well, we didn't have any cash on us, but we did have this still warm pizza. We offered her one of the to-go boxes, but she got all insulted and told us she didn't want our goddamn pizza. She wanted money. We told her to F off and went and found a homeless guy who was more than happy to take our pizza and thanked us profusely while enjoying a slice. Yeah, I've met homeless people who get all indignant because I offered them something besides money. I've met homeless people who I have given money and they have the audacity then to turn around and say, "Give me more." I'm also surprised this person is all like, "And the pizza was 2 inches thick." And it's like, yeah, isn't that the whole thing with Chicago pizza? It's thick. I was in a bicycle shop getting a repair done and some lady in her 20s came up to me and asked me to buy her a bike. I am not very prosperous looking, so I cannot imagine what she was thinking. She was early 20s with a European accent. I thought she might be Dutch or Danish, but I'm not knowledgeable about those things. She looked more like a traveler than a tourist, and she just made a little small talk about the bikes and how expensive they were, and then quite seriously asked me to buy her one. She seemed used to the idea that others would take care of her. I can be very dense about it when a girl is flirting with me, but I don't think that is what was up. After she wandered off, one of the guys asked if she was bothering me and I said no, so I imagine she was creating other issues. Bloody hell, the cheek on that one! I was at work a while back at a major retailer in the Deep South. I had a gentleman come in and ask me about a laptop. The laptop cost $899. I explained the specs, gave him a lowdown on the warranty, etc. He let me wrap up my spiel and looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'll give you $400 for it." This happens a lot, so I patiently informed him that this was impossible for me to do and I do not designate prices. He looked at me and said, "Well, you just lost yourself a computer sale," and left. I wish it ended there. I got off and was walking to my car, and as I got there, a truck comes flying into the parking lot, and it's the same gentleman as before. He whips into the parking spot next to mine and gets out. My metaphorical hackles were raised because this guy was driving so aggressively. He gets out and slams his door and walks over to me. He looks at me and says, "You'll sell that laptop to me for $300 or I'm going to get you fired for racism."
I answered him and just said, "Sir, I have no idea what you are and I have no intention of selling you anything at all. I'm not even on the clock. If you have an issue, go into the store and ask for a manager." He swore explosively that his intimidation factor didn't work and went into the store. I drove home and forgot about it. I get to work the next day and find out he was arrested for trying to steal the shelf display. Feels good, man. I never want to work in retail and have to deal with some goddamn psychopath trying to get me to bring down prices that I have no right to. I found a wallet with $200 and several gift cards in it while I was at work one day. It was a Yu-Gi-Oh wallet, so I figured some kid lost his B-Day money. I turned it into the service desk and forgot about it. 30 days later, no one had claimed it, so I got to keep it. I was telling my friend about my good luck, and a friend of hers, not a friend of mine, says, "You should give me $20. I asked her why. "'Cause I never punched you in the face for all those times you were a female dog to me. It should be noted that I have always been kind to this extremely unpleasant girl, even when she was squatting my living room for several weeks." Well, goddamn, I guess it's just an unpleasant fact that some hoes be like that. Life moves on. Congratulations on your brand new Yu-Gi-Oh wallet, son. I gave this guy a free hot dog and he took it and threw it on the ground and said he wouldn't be a part of my system. He told me that he didn't need my charity because he was an adult. The man made his choice. He refuted the hot dog of charity and now he will suffer for it with an empty tummy. I've helped out a mother trying to buy a pizza dinner for her 3 kids. They looked really hungry and the mom was short maybe $10. She was frantically looking around in her purse and pockets trying to come up with the cash. I gave her a 20 and told her to buy some breadsticks and sodas too. Her look of gratitude is something I'll never forget. On the other hand, I was once in some clothing store with my girlfriend. I don't remember which one. They all kind of blend together in my mind. When a teenage girl walked up to me and demanded $10 so she could buy some lipstick. I refused, so she ran to her mother, who basically chewed me out for refusing her precious baby. So basically, I won't give any charity to entitled buttholes. First of all, yes, my friend, that is the way to go. And second of all, who the hell are these entitled people who just walk up, demand money, and then their parents are just as entitled and expect you to buy things for their child? If someone genuinely needs help, I'm willing to give it. If they think I should be obligated to give them my time and money because of arbitrary reason I don't necessarily agree with, they can go suck a bag of ducks.
They didn't actually say ducks.
I remember about 10 years ago, I had just moved to a new city for college, and I was definitely a starving student. I had a budget of $40 a week for food and transportation, and that was it. Anyway, one evening I'm walking from class to the bus stop, and I see a kid sitting in an alcove begging passers-by for money. A few things. He had a nice bike, new shoes, I had neither, and expensive sunglasses. So he sees me and asks if I can spare some change. Feeling charitable, I reach into my wallet, and I see that I have $22. 2 singles and 20. I take out the 2 singles and pass them to him and he says, "Oh, you aren't giving me the 20? At which point I took the 2 singles back, stuck them in my wallet, pocketed it, and walked off while this moochy butthole says something akin to, "Come on, that's not cool. Can I please have the $2? Beggars can't be choosers has never felt more appropriate. See, that's a good example of where, you draw the line. But a lot of the stories I'm seeing here, and probably not reading because, the topic at hand in the video title and stuff, it's about where you draw the line, But loads of people here are just trying to virtue signal, it seems. One time there was a kid at McDonald's who was lost and couldn't find his mother at a food court in a mall, so it wasn't like middle of the city. He was really hungry and asked me for some food, so I bought him some of the cheaper items because I'm a pretty poor teenager. After I bought him some food, he started yelling at me because I bought him cheap food. He said his mom would have brought him a Big Mac. At that point, I took his food and brought the child to the mall security and let his mom get him some food after she recovered him. The angel and devil sitting on his shoulder.
Abandon the child. He is a lost cause.
Do not blame the child. It is the parents' fault that they are such a spoiled little B-word. I was checking out of a Walgreens and a man with a lot of what looked like skin cancer approached the register. He asked the manager if he was a veteran. The manager was, so he asked to speak privately with him. I couldn't hear much, but he was asking for money. Manager turns him down as I am walking out of the store. Man tracks me down on my way to the car and gives me a sob story about being a war veteran with skin cancer and he needs money to go to the VA. way. I asked him for proof that he was a veteran and he didn't have any, of course. So I said I could not help him. After pressing me for money aggressively, he started cursing me and rolled his eyes and walked away. I posted this on Reddit a while ago, and an actual veteran advised me that they carry some special form on them at all times. He said it's more important than a birth certificate to them. I can't believe a guy that had the audacity to cuss me out when he's the one impersonating a veteran for money. See, that is the thing. It is why I am frankly so skeptical about helping a lot of people, because many people in the world have actually forgone their moral fiber and integrity in turn for making money. And they don't care about you, they don't care about anyone else, they just want money. Just for the skin cancer alone, I probably would have given them like change or whatever to take the bus wherever they need to get to. My boyfriend worked at a gas station for a few years. Apparently, nothing hardens your heart to charity cases quite like it. I was with him once when a man was trying to bum money, then offered to sell us clothes from his car, all about the size for tween-age kids, and then started yelling at us. Meanwhile, there are about 15 other people he could have harassed there. If you didn't expect to run out of gas, why do you have clothes to sell that aren't boxed or even look remotely like you run a shop? I have a little bit more respect for someone who's actively trying to offload some bullcrap on me or sell me something in exchange for money. Even if they offer me something that I genuinely have little to no value in whatsoever and don't want, I still respect it a little more than someone just being like, hey, you, give me some money. At a gas station off the interstate, this guy came up to me and asked for gas money. I gave him $5. He walked straight over to his late model Cadillac and drove off. Several layers of WTF later, I no longer give strangers money for gas. Okay, here's the thing. If they actually straight up walked off with my $5 and then just drove off, I'd be annoyed. If they filled up their car, that's whatever, because I don't really consider cars to be a status of wealth anymore. Because in some cases, what that should tell you is that this person is kind of stupid and bad with their money because they decided to go with a really nice expensive car that is actually outside of their means. Because here's the thing, once you buy a car, your hand is pretty much on your wallet at all times to make sure that you can keep it maintained. Which is personally why I choose to bicycle everywhere like Kentaro Oe, the golden boy. If you know what I'm talking about, you're a legend. I was eating with my family at an outdoor restaurant in Vancouver. We got the bread, water, and appetizers, and then a homeless guy walked up and without asking, took the bread off our table, ate some, and then walked away. Dude, if you had asked, we would have given it to you. Something about the idea of someone stealing my food makes me angrier than stealing my money, and I probably would have kicked off right there and then. I'll pay for a bus fare for someone. A few times people have been short of change, and one time this guy was incredibly hungover, had somehow got to Swindon from London, and his friends had buggered off. I figured a bus fare was a bit of kindness to someone feeling rough, and he was so thankful to get to a town and to some tourist information and a cash point. However, if you're homeless and you sit next to an ATM and stare at me like I'm the devil, you get nothing. Whilst I might have more money than you at the moment, I am in fact a student and I do need that £5 for food, okay? I think that's absolutely fair. Just because you have less than me doesn't mean you're entitled to my things or my money or whatever, and it doesn't mean that I'm obligated to give you anything. Charity's only charity after all if you do it of your own volition. On Oxford Street in London, there's this one homeless dude who sits next to the ATM. He always asks me for change. I don't get it. I obviously don't have change. That's why I'm at the ATM. What does he think I'm going to give him? A 20? I wouldn't mind if he didn't kiss his teeth and spit whenever I politely apologize. Passive-aggressive stuff like that just gets under my goddamn skin. Where does charity end and entitlement begin? When we continue to enable these people by not helping them out of their own situation. Simply giving someone money does not solve the problem. It merely delays it. Give a man a fish and he will eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he will eat for life. This is a very good proverb which should be thought of when restructuring our forever flawed welfare system. Simply throwing money at people and keeping them content does nothing for our society in the long run. Sure, you can feel good about yourself because you advocated for this, but ultimately, you're only making it worse. We need to implement employment programs, skills and training, education, goals that need to be met in order to continue to receive government assistance. If you're going to get this check, you need to maintain a score of X on these following things. We will help you along the way, but in the meantime, there needs to be a give and take. If you don't have a job, you can still work for money you are getting. This raises self-esteem, makes the person feel better about themselves, etc. There is no initiative with our current system. It is broken. I'm going to be serious about this a minute because this is a pretty divisive topic when you get down to it on a national level like this, talking about the welfare state, which I'm just going to make it very clear. I highly value the welfare state, but I also believe in equivalent exchange and that you should work for what you get.
I used to love shopping at 3 or 4 a.m. when I lived in Austin. My favorite store was the Heb at Brody and WM. Cannon. It was huge and empty except for the stockers and a cashier. Loved it. And then I actually had someone try to scam me. Had he asked for a little cash, that would have been one thing. But when he acted like he knew me from a mutual job, I got the creeps. I verified for myself that I had no freaking idea who this guy was by naming off a place I'd never worked from a time when I lived in Houston, and he ate it up, acting excited at our reunion, then giving me a sob story about his kids being unemployed and that they had no money for food. So I said I didn't have cash. He said that was fine, that I could just buy groceries with my card. I decided to give him a semi-true sob story of my own about how sick my retired cop husband had been and that I barely had enough for our groceries and had to borrow from my parents to buy his prescription. I think I managed a tear or two. I said it was just great to see him. We exchanged goodbyes and I made a beeline for the checkout and made them rouse the manager from the office. It thrilled me to no end to discover that they knew about this man and his scam. He'd been told he wasn't allowed in the store, but they just didn't have the manpower to watch the entrance every night. I went on with my shopping, bought my stuff, made them get the manager again, and made him walk me to my car. And that was the end of my love affair with 3 a.m. grocery shopping.
I too once loved going to a shop real early in the morning, but sadly that place was so wrought with crime at that time that they decided to shut at regular times. This will probably get buried, but here it is. As a rule, me, my husband, his brother, we all give money to people on the streets. My husband and I never have lots of money, but it is what it is. My brother-in-law, on the other hand, is truly awful with money and hates having it, so he generally will give $10 or a $20 bill to whoever asks for it at the right time. Well, fast forward a week after he gave some homeless dude about $5 to $10 on his way home from work, he and my husband are walking around downtown, and this homeless guy starts to call out to him. He kinda just waves him off because he's in a bad mood and has no money, and just doesn't want to be bothered. The homeless dude comes running up to him yelling, "Hey man, wait!" So he finally just stops and goes, "What?" And the homeless guy goes, "Here man, you helped me out last week and I just wanted to say thank you. I didn't forget you," and proceeds to hand my brother-in-law $10. At this point, he and my husband are both just like, WTF, and my brother-in-law goes to give it back to the guy saying, "Nah man, you'll need it again, don't worry about me," and the homeless guy was absolutely adamant that he'd take the money. So rad and so bizarre. Finally, a story that meets the criteria of the topic at hand while also showing the what goes around comes around benefit to karma and charity. I've said it before, but some of these are just people virtue signaling and not actually saying anything about the topic. Coincidentally, my dad just told me this story. He was grabbing a quick lunch at McDonald's and some guy asked him for cash to buy food. Dad only had his card on him, so he bought this dude a huge meal instead. A few weeks later, the same guy hits him up for cash at the gas station. My dad doesn't have anything, and he says no with an apology, but the dude freaks out and starts screaming, "You Mexicans are so cheap! Screw you! Go back to your country!" etc. My dad calmly replies, "I remember you. I brought you a meal a few weeks ago, and because of your attitude, I will never, ever help you again, you ungrateful female dog." I mean, yeah, no matter who you are, if someone's immediate response is to be racist to you after you've just said, "No, I will not give you my hard-earned money," then yeah, you can say whatever the hell you want to them as far as I'm concerned. With charity, it depends mostly on who asks and why. I'm a fairly nice guy. I like helping out and such. On Sunday, a coworker told me his sister had cancer and was collecting donations. I gave him a $20 bill to help out. Downtown, you can tell who's just in it for the money. They get like $2 tops. I'll admit, when I went to LA recently, I didn't see a single homeless person that I wasn't like, "Oh, damn, you need this more than me." Except for maybe the one really talkative guy who was all like, "Hey, the royal family are evil, right? I'm telling you this because you're English, I was once visiting a girl I used to date at a local Walmart when I noticed that this middle-aged pregnant woman was struggling with her groceries. Like a gentleman, I offered to carry them to her car for her, which she agreed. When we reached her car, she asked for my number. As it turned out, we went to the neighboring universities. Now, here's where things get a little shady. I get a call from an unknown number nearly 4 months later. Turns out it was the same lady asking if I could lend her Microsoft Word and a bunch of other software. I told her I couldn't because I didn't have it myself and recommended some free alternatives. I thought this was the last I would hear from her until a month later, I get yet again another call. It was her again. This time she informed me her baby was just born. I congratulated her. She then proceeded to ask me to do her graphic design homework for her. I politely declined and blocked her number. Some people like to leech off of kindness, know where to draw the line. I respect the fact that this lady's going to university while being pregnant and then obviously having to look after their baby, but it's not this person's problem to do your homework for you, especially when they're doing their own course and homework that they need to get done too. I once got yelled at for not giving a homeless woman money. She was spitting, she was angry, I was leaving the bank, so it's not out of line that she thought I would have money, but when she asked if I could spare some change and I said, sorry, I don't have any to spare, she freaked. I stopped, looked at her and said, I have 15 grand in student loans, a mortgage and a dog. I don't have money to spare for someone who can't help themselves. She sat there slack-jawed and shuffled off, and I walked away feeling like a butt. You're not a bad person if you're simply trying to look after yourself and live within your means, okay? Plus, this lady sounds like she specifically placed herself in that area to ask people for money so that it'd be awkward when they maybe said no. So I was a student in the north of England and pretty poor. It's winter and I've just walked my friend to the city train station at the end of a visit. This guy approaches me with a story about how he's lost his bank card, his parents were supposed to pick him up, but their car has broken down and he's totally stranded in the city. He sells it to me. He really sells it to me, which is just as well because he needs like £40 to take the train. He even offers to leave me his laptop as collateral until he can pay me back. Now, I don't want this guy's laptop, but I don't want to lose a week's worth of food/expenses. So I come up with what seems to me a reasonable suggestion. I offer to give him the money if he'll let me hold the laptop battery. It was a big clip-on affair, probably worth about £40 to £50 for a replacement, so it seemed a reasonable compromise. He flipped and told me to go F myself, and that's more or less what I did. I'm going to remember that potentially for the future, because I'm guessing the laptop itself is probably got nothing on it. It's a shell, a hollow decoy, and the battery, he's just going to take that home and then put it into the actual laptop he likes to use. A bum I always see around my city came up and asked me for some cash for the bus. I've often seen her around and she always asks, and I usually give her my change or $1 or $2. I tell her I only have a few bucks but would give her some. She asks to see the money and I take out all I had, which was about $3 in change. She leans in and looks it over and asks, "Is that all?" I say it is, then she tells me she needs more. $2 can get you a bus ride anywhere here. I tell her again it's all I have. She gives me a dirty look, says she doesn't need my money, and goes off to ask the next person for cash. I use the term bum because, as it was explained to me, there seems to be some sort of hierarchy for the homeless. Hobos are like migrant workers, think Steinbeck. Tramps are transients who keep to themselves and fend for themselves. Bums are the douches who just want money and are usually butts. Don't need to be homeless or poor to be a bum. I guess the last part kinda holds true. You don't really need to be homeless or anything to be a bum. Here in England, it's a pretty normal thing to say to someone. It's like, "Oh, you're bumming off your mother. Oh, you're bumming off the government, you scav." I do find the whole talk about the hierarchy kind of funny. I'm just imagining at the very top, tippy top, there's a king hobo on Trash Mountain.
Just saw a mother walk into a classroom with a handheld radiation meter and proceed to tell the teacher that little Billy needs to sit in the back corner of the classroom because of the toxic school Wi-Fi radiation. What other insane things have you seen/heard of that these helicopter moms do? Joke's on her when I tell her that visible light is also quote-unquote toxic radiation. Maybe she'll go back to whatever cave she crawled out of, this time with their lights turned out. What I don't get here is that mom was perfectly happy with other children getting killed by the supposedly lethal radiation. Surely, if she was so confident it was toxic, she would have nobly saved the whole class by getting them out of there. But I guess she believes Wi-Fi is toxic, so logic should not be expected. I work in HR at a large telecommunications company. We usually sit in the conference room and can see/hear the interview candidates while they are waiting in the lobby. This poor guy was probably 19 or 20, and his mother wanted to go into the interview with him. We actually had to ask her to wait outside the lobby because even after being asked to sit down, she said it was her, quote, right to be in there. WTF? Guy didn't end up getting the job, and she later called and asked where she could send an appeal letter. Wish I had saved that letter. It was intense. I made a really great friend in high school. He and I were as thick as thieves. Early on in the friendship, my parents took us to a movie. I don't remember the movie, but the start of it got delayed by technical difficulties by about 20 minutes. My parents called from their cell to let my friend's mother know, but only got the voicemail. Thinking that would suffice, we all proceeded to have a good time. Fast forward to the end of the movie, my mom turns her cell phone on and discovers her voicemail box is suddenly full. 20, I believe, was her limit. All of them were my friend's mother calling, pleading for us to return her son, and she would pay any amount we demanded, and that if we called back soon, she wouldn't go to the police. She literally had thought we kidnapped him. Suffice to say, when we got home only 20 minutes later than planned, the conversation was rather awkward. My dad figured out exactly how long it took to walk home from school. As in, literally walked it himself, and then gave me exactly that long to get home every day. If I was more than 5 minutes late, I got a beating for, quote, screwing around. Then they got mad that I had no friends, and after a protracted argument and fight, I got an extra 15 minutes to make friends after school. That winter, I got in a snowball fight and was having fun and didn't realize I'd gone a little too long. So dear old dad drove to my school and started wandering around, bellowing my name until he found me. That was a blast. I believe this is the year after he stood in front of my entire class and told them to start being nice to me. I'm so glad I changed schools every year. That sucks. I know the feeling though. My friends almost never wanted to come to my house, and I pretty much blame it on my folks. My dad was just an embarrassment, blew up on me for having friends over once, and told me I couldn't have anyone in the house unless I asked. This was in front of my friends, whom I had known for years and whom were also let in my house by my mother right before she went to work. Then there were 2 instances where I asked if some friends could spend the night, got what was basically a yes, and then they ended up having to leave because my mother said that since she didn't talk to their parents, again, the first instance where people I had known for years, it would be considered kidnapping. Then the second time, my dad barged into the room, screamed at me, and called my friends bums to their faces, telling them they had to leave. Needless to say, I didn't have many visitors over, and my social life was almost non-existent. There was a girl in my 5th grade class whose mother would take an hour out of her day to come supervise recess. Every 5 minutes, she'd blow a whistle and go, "Emmy, it's time for your shade break." And, just like clockwork, Emmy would have to go sit in the shade for 5 minutes. This crap got really annoying when we would play team sports. No one wanted Emmy on their team. Went to a play group for children with special needs involved with infant development. Talked to a mom after I noticed that she wouldn't let her son off the mat he was playing on, chit-chatting, all the while she was stopping her kid from going off the mat. When I said something along the lines of, "Wow, your son really wants off that mat," she replied deadpan with, "Well, he was a preemie, so I got to protect him from the world." My daughter is blind, has albinism and nystagmus. She was rolling, yelping, and climbing up everything like a spider monkey. Ugh. When I worked at a coffee shop with the most helium-like, whiny freaking voice imaginable, came and ordered a 7-step customized drink and threw a fit when we just asked her to repeat it.
"Oh no! Am I the bad guy? I'm sorry! I thought you'd be able to speak English!"
Then she goes, in the same whiny, begging voice,
"Can my son have a job?"
I hand her a job application.
"He already sent one in! Can you just hire him? Hey! I don't want whipped cream on that!" "So, can he have a job?"
I tell her if he sent an application, he'll get a call when the manager looks through the stack. We had like 20 applications at any given point.
So he's just gonna be one in the pile? Yeah, that's not gonna work. He's a great kid. Just freaking hire him.
Just to get rid of her, I wrote down her son's name and say I'll look into it. I hand her her drink and she leaves. My manager, who heard her screeching voice from the back room, immediately calls me over to see that kid's name. He digs through the pile of applications and immediately shreds the kid's application. His only words, "If we hire him, his mother is going to be here all the time." I once interviewed someone for an entry-level job. The next day, I got a follow-up call from his mother. This kid had not made the cut. He didn't interview confidently and didn't enunciate very well. Not good for a call center job. But I hadn't passed that on to HR yet. I told this woman a little white lie though. I informed her that he had been in the running, but since he can't be counted on to do his own follow-up, he's clearly not the kind of employee I want. When I was in high school, I would go teach French to elementary school children with a few friends of mine. I used to do magic tricks for the kids because they would go absolutely ape and they all loved it. One day I was teaching them and I told them I had a special trick. I did the Balducci levitation for them and they went ballistic. Afterwards, the teacher pulls me aside and sternly tells me I'm lucky she didn't throw me out of the classroom because one of the students who happened to be absent that day is, and I quote, anti-Wiccan and isn't allowed to view, quote, black magic. Had a helicopter mom who became one of the middle school's lunch monitors in order to help her kid make more friends. She would carry around candy and would only give it out to people that were friends of her child, literally denying others if she didn't know them. Ah yes, bribery to make friends. That's surely a good way to show your kids. You haven't seen anything until you've seen helicopter hockey parents. They don't only hover over their kids, they encourage horrible sportsmanship. A few years ago, when my goalie brother was playing Squirt AA, so about age 9 to 10, the opposing team equipped themselves with the age-old strategy of run the goalie. The coaches were in on this. The parents cheered bloodthirstily whenever these little jerks ran into my brother, and they kept this up more than they attempted to score. My brother had had enough. Poor kid snapped and walloped the next boy who skidded into his crease, the net area, which was totally justifiable by that point. This redneck-looking woman and her husband immediately got up, started screeching about their poor precious Joey and get that goalie out of there, ref. Eventually, their whole cheering system was on their feet and yelling out obscene stuff about taking my brother out to 10-year-olds. They all got escorted out by security. You cannot make this crap up. I have a cousin who lives in northern Michigan where youth hockey is a very big deal. My cousin was voted president of the league one year, and his first priority was to get the parents to only encourage good sportsmanship and friendly competition. He sent out over a dozen letters before the season even started to the parents of players throughout the league, stating that any parents seen shouting profanity, encouraging violence, or cheating, etc., would be permanently banned from all future games. The first round of the season starts, and it was a disaster. Parents were worse than usual, and several people were arrested at different games for fighting in the stands. Needless to say, the letters hadn't worked. So, my cousin decides to hold a meeting for players and coaches only to discuss the problem. After having the police forcibly vacate a few parents who didn't agree with the quote, players and coaches only aspect of the meeting, he asked the players what they wanted to do. Most of the players actually said they didn't want their parents to come to games. Most of them weren't trying to go pro. They just enjoyed playing hockey and their parents were ruining it for them. So, they took a vote at the meeting and my cousin sent out one last letter that simply said parents/step-parents/foster parents/legal guardians, etc. were no longer allowed at official league games. If a parent was spotted, that team would forfeit the game. If they came a second time, that team forfeit the season. My cousin got some death threats, but nothing ever came of it. We decided to teach the Hunger Games in English last year. I had a few parents raise concerns because they had heard a few rumors, but it was nothing a quick conference and a little reassuring couldn't fix. Until Mrs. Bickerstaff happened. Now, Mrs. Bickerstaff had an inflated sense of self-importance to begin with. A housewife who, with complete seriousness, signs her emails Mrs. Nolanda Charlene Bickerstaff Esquire type of self-important. She not only pitched the biggest of fits about not allowing her son to read it, we offered an alternative to kids whose parents put their foot down and said no, but embarked on a 6-month campaign to get the school shut down unless we pulled the book from curriculum for everyone. She disenrolled her son, threatened to sue us for the cost of sending him to an expensive private school, and called every parent in the school to try to get them to do the same. When she didn't have any success with that, she went to the local news and told them what was going on. What resulted was a flattering news story that reported our high test scores and innovative approach to learning. We're a charter school. I should mention that she didn't read the book. Alrighty, I have a few. I worked at Whole Foods, and that is ground zero for lunatic parents. Number 1. There was the, quote, nutritionist and her mom that didn't want anything scanned because of the, quote, radiation. Number 2. One lady was going on and on about how her son was corn-free, egg-free, dairy-free, and soy-free because that's what her chiropractor told her to do. I wanted to apologize to that kid so bad. Number 3. When I worked at a cooking store, like Williams-Sonoma, I had a lady come in with her tween-age kids trying to find glass baking dishes because, quote, metal is bad for you. I suggested silicone, and she said that was worse. So I suggested parchment paper, but she already used that. I had a hard time holding back the massive smile when I told her that parchment has silicone in it. Every time she would go off on something, her kids would just roll their eyes. Didn't see it personally, but a few years ago there was an article in my local newspaper about a mother cleaning the vegetables she was cooking for her family in bleach. Didn't realize she was doing anything wrong until one of her children nearly died. I was not allowed to walk to school by myself even though it was literally 1 block away from my house because my mom said I would get forced upon. I was in junior high. I was never allowed to be unattended and was not allowed to go to friends' houses because my parents did not trust other parents. This extended all the way through high school until I started, quote, acting out, and they sent me to a lockdown mental health treatment facility. My childhood was painfully lonely, to say the least. I was volunteering for this thing 2 years ago where we helped freshmen haul their stuff, mostly tampons and televisions, into the dorms. One mom came at the end of the day and flipped her lid because her daughter's roommates already divided up the space, she was last to get there, and, oh yes, because her daughter didn't get the dorm with the swimming pool. Yes, her daughter had to change dorms because it was too dang hard to walk to the 2 buildings in a 50-foot radius to use the swimming pool. Her daughter was really chill though. Let's hope she stays that way. Pro tip for younger Redditors, if you're going to bring your parents with you into an admissions interview for a graduate program, it won't hurt your chances of getting in, but it will make you the laughingstock of the admissions department for the day. My brother is an admissions counselor at a major American university for one of their graduate schools. He told me that it's not an uncommon thing these days for helicopter parents to attend their children's admissions interviews with them. These are people in their 20s taking their parents with them to admissions interviews for graduate school. My jaw dropped when I heard this. We know them as umbrella parents because they cover you from everything. Poncho parents are more extreme. They're the parents that won't allow computer access without them right there, put huge restrictions on TV, G or PG, kids like 16, won't allow any video games, etc. Anyways, a Poncho parent I know managed to keep her 16-year-old son under the delusion that girls are gross and have cooties. My cousin has a helicopter mom, very controlling and dominant. Kate never got to think for herself, never had to learn discipline, financial or personal. She never had to. Her mom did it all for her. When Kate finally got into university and was away from her mother for the first time in her life, Kate went completely off the rails, since to all extents she was an 18-year-old with the maturity of an 8-year-old. She would struggle to fill out basic paperwork and forms for the class, since she'd had no experience of it. Worst of all was that she had no experience of the opposite sex, since she'd been sheltered all her life, and so she got taken advantage of frequently. What was even more stupid was that her mom still to this day does not see where she went wrong. She can't realize or admit that she weakened her child by removing life opportunities that strengthen a personality. In high school, I was friends with this girl we'll call Judy. Judy's mom was really strict/overprotective, and she could never go anywhere with us. And when she did, she'd inevitably end up grounded. She could never hang out, and she wasn't allowed to have friends over very often. Once when I was at her house, she got grounded for yelling at the dog. This led to a rebellion where Judy just stopped doing anything her mom told her. She started drinking heavily whenever she could, and she also smoked weed and did whatever pills or drugs people had. She always had to babysit her if she came out with us. This went on for a few months, and she met this guy. We'll call him Tom. He was about 25, and the kind of dude that's every parent's worst fear. Judy came from a good upper-middle-class family. Her dad was a dentist, that sort of thing. Tom was a 25-year-old burnout, and he was on house arrest when Judy met him. It was love at first sight for her, even though we all tried to talk her out of it. She started hanging out at Tom's house anytime she could. She'd skip school to go over there, sneak out of the house at night, that sort of thing. Well, it's no surprise what happened next. Judy got pregnant. She was 8 months along at our high school graduation and married Tom and had the baby shortly thereafter. Moral of the story, don't be a ridiculously strict parent because your child will rebel and bad things will happen. P.S. The same exact thing happened to Judy's sisters when they got older. Sad stuff. Edited to update. Judy and Tom stayed married for 10 plus years. I don't keep up with her, but from what I've heard, she went on to become a hairdresser. Tom stayed out of trouble and the kid turned out okay. He'll be 20 now. Dang, that makes me feel kinda old. I had a friend, Christina, whose mom was like that but more crazy. She had divorced parents who split custody pretty evenly. When she was with her dad, things were good, but when she was with her mother, if her mother ever saw her talking to a boy, even a male cashier at a store, she was grounded. She wasn't allowed to have friends over, and she wasn't allowed to go out anywhere besides school without her mom. Even when she was staying with her father, she would get called at least once an hour. Needless to say, she rebelled. Girl was a notorious nympho and a bit of an exhibitionist. She would flash cars, make out with anyone at the drop of a hat, and pleasure her boyfriends in public spaces. I refused to go to a movie theater with her because of how she would defile the place. Thankfully, she was smart enough to use protection and wasn't interested in drugs. Hilariously, when her mother met me, she decided on the spot that I wasn't allowed to be her friend because I was such a bad influence. Apart from my looks at the time, I was a poser punk / goth / whatever girl. I was perfect. I didn't do drugs, had decent grades, I was the only one of our friends involved with church and volunteering, and I was waiting for marriage before giving up my V-card. This woman met me at a school event, and because I was wearing a hoodie during the summer, she accused me of being a cutter and drug dealer in front of my own mother, and then proceeded to shame my mother for allowing me to have a boyfriend. My mom even felt sorry for her daughter. Yeah, this goes without saying, but you can't prepare your child for the world if you're their only world. Kids are gonna screw up, act out, argue with you, all that stuff. That doesn't make them bad people and need a constant supervision. If anything, that makes it worse because you're judging their every move. Paranoia is contagious. Instead, learn to accommodate their needs, but talk with them about what they want. Now, if they want to do hard drugs, that's probably not going to end well, but you can be a parent without being a bodyguard. I wish I had seen this thread earlier, but here goes. I'm a preschool teacher for ages 3 to 4 years old. One day, one of my girls, fake name Abby, is playing with, fake name, Becky's security blanket during free time. Becky wants her blanket back, so she asks Abby to get off. Abby refuses, so Becky pulls the blanket from under her and Abby cries. I tell Abby that she needs to listen to what Becky is saying and respect her friend's belongings. I also tell Becky that next time, instead of pulling the blanket from under Abby, she should just come tell a teacher. Maybe 5 minutes later, while I'm passing out snacks, Abby flips into a crazy rage and runs towards Becky, tackles her, and takes a huge bite out of her shoe. Plastic literally came off. I pull Abby off and try as calmly as I can to ask her why the heck she attacked Becky. Basically, it was revenge for getting her in trouble and taking the blanket away from her. Now, here's the mother part. I write an incident report telling both parents what happened, and, of course, I put Abby in the thinking chair for such an outrageous attack and call her mom, leaving a message and whatnot. But the next day, Abby's mom comes in and finds the child that got bitten, Becky, and tells her that if she hadn't yanked the blanket out from under Abby, maybe she wouldn't have attacked you. Of course, I asked the parent to leave immediately and to not speak to the children, that Abby was the one who attacked out of spite, and that her child's reaction was not an appropriate one that could be excused in my classroom. The mom got so mad at me for defending Becky, a 3-year-old, that she reported me to my supervisor for being unprofessional. I still had my job, but mom withdrew her child. But seriously?
What's the quickest you've noped out of a job? It was a shop that refurbished train suspension hydraulics. 40% of the guys were missing at least part of a finger. Maintenance guy was missing 4 on one hand and 1.5 on the other. Half the guys were intoxicated, and the guy training me stormed out halfway through the second day. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna dip now. I'm sure your fingers really appreciate that decision. Many years ago, I worked at a popular sports bar as a line cook. First day, they had me train with a guy who didn't speak English for 2 hours. Not a huge deal. Mostly you observe people in a kitchen and that's how you learn. The owner came back and said she was scheduling me to be alone the next day, which was Super Bowl Sunday. I noped out of there so fast. I left right then and there. I'm willing to bet the person who left that position before you left for the exact same reason. I worked for a newspaper for most of a week. I was expected to use my own laptop and software. No IT, and I'd have to share logins and passwords with 3 other people and guess when they would need them. For me, it was 1 week. It was 1985 and a collections agency was looking for an IT guy. It was basically desktop support on some IBM PCs. It took me a week to realize what a soul-deadening place that was, and I bolted. It was mutual, actually. They saw how I was reacting to some of the techniques the collectors used. The targets were mostly old people who were encouraged to sell family heirlooms and the like to pay off debts. 3 days after my 2-week training, I was supposed to be a seasonal temp worker for a national propane company. The job distribution and training consisted of taking calls off hours for people who wanted refills and acting as a messenger service, referring their contact info to their local store when they opened the next day. Easy peasy. When I got out onto the floor, I found out I was actually expected to be a dispatcher for drivers, and also the first point of contact for all emergency situations. Things I had never been so much as briefed on in training. My first shift, I had to field a call from a local police officer who was on site to a horrific propane truck crash. I got to wake the guy's district manager in the dead of night, tell him his worker was deceased, and the overturned truck was blocking a few lines of the freeway, and the police were trying to get a hold of him. That was just the start. One customer got the smell of garlic and eggs in their house, and I got the call. "What do I do, Mr. Dispatcher?" "How would I know? Get out of the house ASAP?" Another customer, "The CO detector is going off." I got the call, instead of 911 for some reason. I had zero interest in being an underpaid, not trained emergency dispatcher. It's the only job I took off on without giving a 2-week notice. I was nice enough to finish out my shift on the 3rd day, but that was it. Honestly, you were way too lenient on these guys. That's a serious position to be just dropping you in without the appropriate training. I would have gone a step further and reported them to the proper authorities. Someone needs to be properly trained in that position. You're handling emergencies. You can't afford to just be any old Joe. I went into an office for an interview. They said they had several positions available and I wanted to do some admin stuff. Well, after the interview, they told me to get into a van to do the next part of the process. Turns out we were driving an hour away so I could shadow one of their door-to-door salespeople. They would ask residents to go into their basement to check their hot water heaters to see if they were eligible to replace them with their company's own. I felt pretty uncomfortable about this, and pretty peeved that my whole day was gone doing this. The worst part was the girl I was shadowing spent half the day sitting around in the truck reading magazines, and just waiting for people to come home from work. I was sort of asking questions about the job, and she got defensive and said, "Well, I decide if you get this job or not." To which I replied, "Yeah, I don't know if I want to do this." But she kept insisting that it was her who decided if I worked. I don't think she understood that I meant I don't want to do this crap, period. What a waste of a day. Yeah, a lot of companies like this have really sketchy hiring processes, where you think you're applying for one job and then you get dragged out to something like this. I'm sure a lot of people just get an Uber and go home at that point. Found out that the educational assistance they touted in their advertisement applied only to full-time employees, and that they both defined full-time as no fewer than 40 hours and kept anyone that would apply for that assistance from ever being qualified for it. None of this was advertised, and the people I interviewed with assured me, a college student, that working 21 hours a week would get me benefits. Too bad I read my contract before signing it and called them out. Don't lie to your employees, especially during an interview, on something that can be easily and swiftly disproven. If you're willing to lie to me about this, what else are you willing to lie to me about? Mine had to be when I was 18 and working at Blockbuster. I was helping the manager during the before open shift, getting new items stocked on the shelves that came in that morning. My mom called me and told me that my dad was having a heart attack, and she was panicking while waiting for the ambulance. Why did she call me at work to tell me this? The Blockbuster I worked at was in a strip mall type area behind my cul-de-sac. My house and the Blockbuster was separated by a small alley and a 3-minute walk. I told my manager what was happening and asked if I could leave to help my mom while they waited for the ambulance. She said no. I just stood there looking at her, thinking she couldn't be serious. I would be gone for all of 10 minutes and back helping her if needed. She stressed how important it was to get things done that needed to be done, and I could only leave if I called around to the other workers and found someone to come in and cover for me while I was gone. I took off my name tag, slammed it on the counter, and walked out. I never went back for any reason. For any who might wonder, my dad came out fine and was in the hospital for a few days. I was interviewing for a contract position at a very small game development company, and they told me that they were looking for someone to help finish up an existing project. Literally, the game looked like it was made in MS Paint, as if they had just hired some random guy off the street and asked them to make some art for them. Granted, it's a mobile game and sold for the standard 99 cents, so maybe that's not the worst. But the game itself doesn't look engaging at all either. But I figure, worst comes to worst, I could make some money on the side with some low effort. Then they told me that my pay would be a percentage of the sales. Noped right out of that one. I was pretty well qualified, but between jobs and receiving financial support, I get an interview with a small company. I'm looking forward to earning some money again. The boss/interviewer is a huge jerk. At one point, he asks me if I feel guilty that people like him are supporting me. I politely inform him that he'll have to support me a bit longer while I find a suitable job. I tell him that the interview is over, but thanks for your time. I went for a trial shift with a door-to-door sales company. The guy I was partnered up with told me that if he didn't make above the target sales, he was coming out with the equivalent of £3 per hour, which in the UK is well below minimum wage. This was a commission-only, self-employed role. Noped all the way home that day. Here's another example, guys. Just avoid that door-to-door stuff. It's never good for you as the worker. I worked in a bakery. It was my first day, so I get there in the morning to meet everyone. Then they have me grease up the baking trays for the others to fill. I lift up the first tray and like 10 to 15 cockroaches just scatter everywhere from under the tray. I tell the guy showing me the work that there were cockroaches, and he just shrugged. This was all in the back store. Customers were 10 feet away. So I tell the guy I'm not feeling too well after about an hour of doing that, and I head to the bathroom. When I come out, I told him I couldn't do that job, and he told me to get a real job then. So I left and got myself a proper job. I hope you called the health inspector too, 'cause that's just gross. I had an interview at what I thought was a regular steakhouse in a new town I had just moved to. The interview went well. It was just before the restaurant opened, so it was pretty empty. At the end, a waitress starting her shift walked by in buttless chaps and a thong. Turns out that was their uniform. The manager called like 30 minutes later saying I got the job. I had to politely decline that one. Back in college, I used to work part-time as a nanny. One summer, I landed a really sweet-sounding 40-hour-a-week Monday to Friday nannying job, looking after a baby and toddler. I was super excited about all the money I was going to make working that many hours. But the weird thing about this job was that the unemployed dad was also going to be at home with me. He was supposed to be spending all his time looking for a job, and I was watching after the kids while the wife was at work. Literally that first week, on day 2 or 3, he starts hinting about his marriage problems and how his wife sleeps on the couch. The next day, he asks me to try out his fancy new massage chair. I reluctantly agreed, and he just stared at me while I laid on this vibrating chair and was like, "Oh yeah, nice. Great, thanks." He then offered to give me an actual massage sometime, and maybe I wouldn't mind giving him one too. On Friday afternoon, I went home, told my parents who I was living with for the summer everything, and my mom called the guy and told him I wasn't coming back the following Monday, or ever. He then sent me a text message saying he was disappointed in me. Ugh, and his poor wife. This guy just sounds like a total creep. You definitely dodged a bullet on this one. It was my first day working for a family business that had just bought the equipment necessary to install underground fiber optic lines. They had previously been realtors, but had read an article in an entrepreneur's magazine that said $1 million a year gross was common. They pulled their 14 and 17-year-olds out of school to act as laborers, and the mom and dad were going to run separate crews. I was their first employee hire. As I was setting up my bore path, the mom told me we didn't need to expose an electrical line. We would just drill a few feet underneath it, and we didn't need to expose it. I told her that was ridiculous, reckless, and dangerous. The husband then came over and wanted to fight me for insulting his wife. And not 30 seconds into his tirade, the 14 and 17-year-old drilled directly into a large electrical line, which pops the transformer and sounds like an explosion. As I was walking away, the father went from wanting to fight me to chasing his 17-year-old around with a retention pond. The mom was begging me not to leave. Nope. I was unemployed for a couple months and started applying for pretty much any job I could do. This one was a basic small biz IT support contractor. The employee the interviewer introduced to me mouthed "run" when he turned his back. That was enough for me. Shout out to the employee though for giving you the warning. For me, it's when I was cold calling people about injury claims. Have you been injured in the past 3 years? That kind of thing. The thing that really irked me was that all of the people I called in those 20 minutes were polite, said they're not interested, and they were just sitting down for dinner. I quickly realized it was a horrible job, and I was in no way cut out for it. I left after 20 minutes and just walked out the door without a word. I went to my orientation at a boot factory. They're government contracted and so pay minimum wage. So I figured I'd work there a while and look for something better. After we do the usual paperwork signing and such, we're taken as a group onto the factory floor for a tour. It's hot, it's crowded, it stinks, and everyone working looks annoyed by our presence. Okay, I guess not everyone loves their job, right? No biggie. I'm sure this won't be so bad. Then our guide informs us in no uncertain terms that our coworkers quite often give new people bad information to get them in trouble or to make them mess up. They'd even be the ones to rat you out. Then we were told our foreman is the type to yell for no reason, ask people if they're drunk in an accusatory way for no reason, and is generally a giant jerk. I took a few moments to think after these last revelations and said, nah, and walked out of the building without a word to anyone. Screw that, Captain. I'm not putting up with all that for $8 and some change an hour. I work as a nanny, but when I first got into childcare, I was just babysitting. So it was my first night babysitting for this one family. Things went well, changed some diapers, put the baby to sleep, and that was about it. The parents come home and are very drunk. They asked me to stay for a little while after they got back, which was weird. Then they offered me, a 16-year-old at the time, a drink. Feeling a little pressured, I took it and just sipped on it. Then the mom got really close to me and says I probably shouldn't be driving home after having a drink. Once again, feeling a little pressured, I was thinking about accepting. So I asked if I'd just be sleeping on the couch. I'll never forget her next words to me. She says, "Oh no, honey, you'll be going to bed with us." I noped out of there so fast. I think I ran to my car, but it was just kind of a panicked blur. I left my purse there and everything. Second day at Rue 21, and the managers plus other coworkers all went out to lunch together and left me alone in the store. I wasn't able to ring anybody up yet, and the store was packed. I just walked out. When I was 16, I had an interview at a local pizza place in a not so good part of town. I was hired, and as I was walking out, 2 guys came in and robbed the place. The manager gave them the money in the register and they ran out. I looked at him and he said, "You get used to it." I never went back. Yeah, I don't blame you either. If it's that frequent of an occurrence, it's definitely not a safe place to be spending a lot of your time. I had a job in a salad plant, those bags of salad mix a lot of restaurants use. I was there for 2 weeks coring lettuce. In front of a conveyor belt, 8 hours a day, pick up a head, slam it, pull the core, put it down, next. You talk to your coworkers or you plot the downfall of Western civilization. One really sweet lady had been there for 10 years. 10 years on the lettuce line. She got called into the office and was gone for about a half an hour. She said, "I won't be here tomorrow. I got promoted." I asked what she'd be doing. Cabbage! I didn't quit. I wished her well, dropped my stuff, and walked out. I feel bad about not quitting, but I was young. And, well, 10 years. That was 28 years ago. Had I stayed, I might be up to carrots by now. I sometimes wonder how my life would have been different had I stayed. And in those moments, I celebrate every decision I've ever made. I was hired as an intern manager for a local nonprofit recycling plant. This meant I would hire and train interns for this amazing work opportunity. Turns out for them, interns meant working for free, doing basically everything for the organization event and marketing-wise, while also cleaning the bathroom and taking out the trash for the whole place every week. That's actually super illegal for being way too close to slave labor. I was on contract for minimum 6 months, but I managed to get out of it after 2. I ain't risking my career for their shady business practices. I wanted something part-time when I was at uni. I applied for a position at the local cinema chain and got an interview. It was one of those high turnover places that meant if you got an interview, there was a 95% chance you got a job. The guy at the box office radioed to his manager and was told to take me to room 7. We got to room 7 and wait. About 25 minutes pass before the manager starts screaming abuse over the radio because we're not in room 2. So off to room 2 we go on the other side of the building. It's a 15-screen cinema. The manager starts trying to turn on the charm, and I basically say if that's how you treat your employees in front of a job candidate, there's no way I'm ever working for you, and ask the other guy to show me out. I'm sure it made no difference to his behavior, but it saved me a lot of potential abuse. I worked at Claire's for 1 day. At the end of the shift, she asked me to put a bucket load of tiny earring packages back on the walls. A few hours later, I finish, and apparently misplaced a few of them. So she threw all of them on the floor and said to do it again. Nope. Sounds like she just has some kind of power trip. That was completely unnecessary. It was listed as a marketing position. The guy doing the interview started showing me and the other candidate how sharp Cutco knives are. Turns out it was a pyramid scheme. The guy kept asking if I wanted to sign on to buy some knives to sell. The other candidate went to the bathroom and never returned. I felt really awkward, also needed to wait to be picked up, so I stayed for the whole thing. I once saw a Craigslist ad for a stereo salesman. I showed up to a warehouse where a bunch of dudes got into a minivan. The owner told me to go on a run and see how it is, and then talk about the job. Turns out all these guys did was lie and con. They would go up to strangers and say, "Hey man, my cousin's got this stereo, but he got arrested and I don't need it. It's worth $500, but I'll gladly sell it for $200. Then use pushy tactics to get people to go to the ATM and give them money. The system was a piece of crap off-brand, and I overheard the owner saying in bulk it only cost him $20 to buy. Yeah, I noped out of this pretty quickly. I also called the police. JCPenney. I came to work to set up shelves and things, store technician, but my boss handed me a mop and said someone lady pooped in an aisle when she didn't get her way. I handed the mop back and said I'm not hazmat certified, but he is, and noped out of there. My first day on a carpentry job when I was 22, a 20-year-old kid shot me with a nail gun from about 20 feet away. He thought it was hilarious, and so did everyone else, including the company owner. I noped right out of there. Yeah, no kidding. And I hope you called the police, cause that could have been a very serious injury. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.